What's up, guys? Today we are going over another non-OU tier from Generation 5. Another one that I really enjoyed playing in the current generation, but just like with UU, I stopped playing it once the generation ended. However, these guys haven't, and thus I have enlisted their expertise to help me explain this wonderful, possibly most aggressive of Uber's tiers. But we'll get into that. So with me I have Blim, Edgar, and Hack. What's up, guys?
What's up?
Yo.
Hello.
Alright, they are very accomplished, and they know everything about this tier. So, we will start with a simple question. Why do you guys like Gen 5 Ubers? Blim, start with you.
Yeah, I'll start off. Black White Uber, just a very fun, I found it a very fun minigame. Every playstyle is viable, hyper offense, balance, even stall, even though it's the least viable playstyle, you can make it work. It's a very fast pace, and I feel like you always have a chance to win any given matchup. And I just like using strong Pokemon. Now, obviously, Kyogre, Dialga, Mewtwo, Darkrai. You have very diverse team building options. So all around, I just find it a very fun, fast-paced metagame where you could use a lot of strong Pokemon, and that's about it.
That's what Ubers is. Edgar?
Yeah, I like it because it's very diverse. I think what I like about it the most is that most Pokemon in the tier have a wide range of sets that change structures of teams and the flow of the battles completely. So you never get bored of it, and like Blim said, in this tier you can outplay every matchup if you have a good team. So that's something that pushes you forward to keep playing it and knowing everything about the game. So it's fascinating for me how these strong Pokemon lead to very complex games.
That's a really good explanation. And Hack?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something that hasn't been said, but this was the last Uber's gen, I feel like, where the sort of broken mechanics actually worked out. But after we got XY with Xerneas and stuff like that, it sort of became clear that certain mons were a little bit on a quite different level threat-wise than others. And not utility-wise, but in terms of how threatening they were. And I feel like in Black and White, it's much more even when it comes to the top layer. So there are a lot of big threats, but it's very hard to quantify, to say, Ho is more threatening than Latios or vice versa. Darkrai is more threatening than Arceus normal. You know, there are a lot of things that are good on a high level, not mediocre. A lot of things are genuinely good, and that leads to a very interesting interaction. That's probably why I really like it still, although I don't get as much.
That's a really good way to put it, because so basically, are you saying that once you get to XY and Oris and later, then Primal Groudon and Xerneas and Mega Salamence and all those guys, they're such a step up from the rest that it's kind of uneven around those two, or around those guys?
Yeah, and I guess viability rankings aren't all, but if you look at classical viability rankings of Black and White, I at least from my memory, a lot of A+ mons. There are a lot of A+ mons that are really good, not too many in S rank. And when it comes to Auras, there's this clear cut of 3-4 Pokemon that are just levels in threat above everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I like that because that's how I feel about Gen 4 Ubers a lot of the time. There's so much crazy stuff, but it all feels like it balances each other out and nothing's really above anything else. So that's an interesting perspective. Do you think that the relative lack of spikes in Gen 6 onwards has something to do with it? Because in Gen 4 especially, and a lot in Gen 5, then spikes are really prominent, to the point where I've even seen some people, I remember Melee Mewtwo said that spikes are S rank just as much as any Pokemon in Black and White. And then Gen 6 comes around and brings defog, and you don't really have that hazards check all option anymore. Does that have something to do with it?
I think spikes are definitely something to be careful with in Black and White. I think whether you have spikes or not gives you the upper hand, or can it can make your team sink or swim, like Americans said it. But in general, I think spikes makes it for a more diverse metagame because even defensive teams have a way to push back towards the stronger teams, and a lot of the things are viable also because they have spike support. So, in my opinion, spikes are really good, but they are not broken. Let's say because spinning is possible first of all. So if anything has reliable counterplay, it's not broken.
So yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, as for me, I would say that I kind of agree with. I would say I agree with Millie Mewtwo. I think that spikes are. I don't know if I would call them broken, but they're very strong. Especially when you compare like the spikers the spin blockers compared to the rapid spinners. Obviously, the spin blockers, Arceus Ghost, Giratina A, they're much stronger than all of the spinners. And we have such a diverse options of spikers, Forlast, Saligator, Deoxys A, Deoxys Speed, that if your team is not prepared for spikes, it's more than likely that your team is just going to get ran over. So I feel like spikes are maybe not broken, but they're right up to the edge of the line. They're just extremely strong.
I mean, strategy-wise, I think Black and White Ubers, compared to later gens where defog is present, gives you a way to build teams that where you will have spikes up. So you can actually build consistent strategies surrounding entry hazards in a way you can't in later gens because they might just get defogged. And this will sort of keep things in check a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, so do you mean like, in Gen 5, then I've seen a lot of Roar Latios and like Roar Dragontail Giratina Origin, and you don't really see a lot of phasing moves in Gen 6 and onwards, and it's because, I guess in Gen 6 and onwards, then on the rare occasion you see a phasing move, it's more a defensive tool rather than an offensive one, and in Gen 5, then you can use, because you can so reliably have spikes, like you said, then you can use these phasing moves as offensive weapons. Would you say that has anything to do with it?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, there are so many, like a plethora of strategies here, because say you have a sweeper, say for example Arceus Normal, which is the most common setup sweeper in the tier. So you have that, and you feel like you need chip damage on stuff so you can sweep, right? That's and you want to make that as reliable as possible. You don't want to end up using gimmicks just to lure in some check. You just want a consistent strategy, and here you have spikes, so you can get your chip damage on Arceus fighting, or you can get things just weakened into +2 extreme speed range. So they can be used as sort of a baseline to be consistent offensively, whereas in later gens you couldn't really rely on that for chip damage, so you had to use more wall-breaking strategies with stronger things instead.
I like that.
So that's how I view it. And also facing moves, obviously, like Roar Latios, Roar Kyogre, just to get stuff going.
Mm-hmm. I like that, because a lot of people will say that not being able to get rid of hazards is what makes the tier annoying to them. And I always, I especially felt it, not just in Ubers, but in general, in tiers with defog, that hazards are such a good thing because they keep stuff that might otherwise be broken from being too broken. And that's one of the reasons why I like Gen 5 Ubers. No matter what the threat is, then it's not going to be immune to hazards. And that's how you keep everything in check, whether it's Kyurem White or Genesect or whatever. All right, so speaking of top-tier threats, especially those kept in line by hazards, let's start with the viability rankings. So the sole S rank, according to this most recent set of rankings, is Kyogre. So we all know that Kyogre does Drizzle and the Water move and the Ice Beam and the Thunder, but what else does it do? What are Kyogre's main functions in Gen 5 Ubers? Whoever wants to step up and start.
I can go ahead. Oh, okay. I can go ahead and start off. Kyogre is generally going to be it has about, I'll say about 3 sets primarily: Choice Scarf, Choice Specs, and a defensive set with Scaled, Rest, Sleep Talk, and Roar. Its primary function is probably a revenge killer with the Choice Scar set for Mewtwo's, Darkrai's, and it's in general just a very strong threat versus offensive teams. The choice spec stuff is obviously just a wall breaker that's designed to just demolish defensive teams and very passive teams with its powerful choice specs, water sprouts, and surfs. And the defensive set is more designed to check Darkrai and to be a sleep talk user, and also to check their gears, Palkias, and generally other Pokemon such as those. So that's just a general overview of what Kyogre does.
Yeah, I think Kyogre, well, what Blim said is very accurate, but I also think Kyogre, as a Pokemon, is very diverse in terms of, Blim mentioned 3 sets, but Kyogre also, for example, has Thunder Wave set with Lomberry, Ice Beam, and Thunder, Water, or Hydro Pump, or Calm Mind Ice Gem, for example. So it's a very Kyogre. What I think has going for it is that it can run a set that could benefit your team to the fullest, and since it's a very self-dependent Pokemon, it doesn't need anything to rely on. You can run whatever set you feel like your team needs, and since it's very bulky, special defensive wise, it can run a variety of sets to accomplish that. And also, the defensive sets are also really good because it has access to Scald. So things like Ferrothorn that switch in can get burned and they don't kill it. So overall, it's a really good Pokemon to have on your team, even if you don't want, even if your team is not rain centered. I feel like.
I'm glad you mentioned the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I just wanted to add. I think what Blim said. It's like 3 Pokemon in one, right? So you can get your Wall Breaker slot for it. You can have your sort of glue slot for it, which is the special defensive set, and you can even do your. Although I personally don't like the Revenge Killer set for it, and then obviously some more niche sets with Thunder Wave. So. It should really be viewed as like 3 Pokemon. It does very different things with those 3 sets.
Yeah.
I also remember seeing that you used an Ice Gem set before, which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah. That set was designed basically to, since some of the main checks to Kyogre are Latios and Latias and Arceus Grass, you Calm Mind on the switch, and then you hit them with Ice Beam, and it's a clear OHKO. And that lets, for example, sweepers like Rock Polish Groudon to sweep late game. So that I think that's the essence of Kyogre, I feel like, because it's a Pokemon you can splash on your team, and you can do whatever you want with it.
Sorry, there are sirens screaming by my apartment right now. Probably because they got OHKO'd by a +1 Ice Gem Ice Beam. Anyway, so I was going to say, another cool thing about Kyogre, like you guys said, it does so many things for a team, and one of the other things that it does, like just by having rain, then you can activate something like Kabutops, which, well, relevant because of the whole spikes thing, and it's one of the few Pokemon that can really threaten a spin, but it's also a devastating sweeper in its own right, so it just brings so much support to the team. And also with how ridiculously broken Sleep is in this generation, then having that, I mean, mostly reliable check to Darkrai is just so good. And I'm also glad that you mentioned the fact that even if your team isn't rain-centered, then it's still such a great Pokemon. Like, I know it's been used a lot on sand teams just because of what it does defensively. And there have even been at least 2, I think, I've seen Heatran rain teams, maybe 3, and such a concept is normally unthinkable for most people who have ever played Gen 5 OU or Gen 4 Ubers. But Heatran rain is like a genuine thing, so Kyogre just really does it all. So before we move on to the next pokes, then I would want to ask, Kyogre is S rank, but would you ever feel like it's mandatory or like it's such like a significant step above the rest of the tier?
Never. For me, the big four in the tier, and we can get to that later. And I think those are the S ranks are Arceus Ghost, Kyogre, Groudon, and Genesect. But I don't. Even then, I don't think these are a step above A+ that warrants them to be used all the time. So no,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, not even close. Because Kyogre has a lot of offensive counterplay as well as defensive counterplay. In that you can build your team. Sometimes what Hyper Offense does, which I guess we'll get into that later. But an example is that sometimes you don't even run a Kyogre check, but you build your team so Kyogre gets worn down by spikes and hazards in general. So Kyogre doesn't do much. And you can do, since it only has base 90 speed, a lot of things outspeed it. So you can like just hit it hard with something, and it doesn't have the best physical defense. So sometimes it only takes something that hits very hard in the physical side to check it, or you can run a defensive check in the form of Latios, Arceus Grass, Palkia-ish, Giratina A. So or even Ferrothorn in the later game. So
I feel like it's just not on automatic. Like
it's not
like,
Xerneas. Like you
no,
need
exactly.
specific to check.
It's
you need,
it's no Primal Groudon, right?
yeah.
No, because if you want to wall break with it, your strongest move is Ward Spout, obviously, and that's completely dependent on having high health. And with hazards, you can't always have high health. And there's also the Genesect U-turns. So if you end up in 1v1, you can't really Ward Spout a lot of the time. And so the most strong sets it has are they're good, but they're not automatic, I would say.
Okay, that's good. All right, so let's move on to, well, I guess according to you guys, then these ranks might be a little, they might be a little different, but not too much different. So let's move on to Genesect, who is
Can I say one thing right quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to take the contrarian opinion to Hack and Edgar. I actually do believe Kyogre is marginally a step above the rest because I feel like personally every team needs a Kyogre switch in. Like Edgar had the point that Kyogre can be worn down by hazards, but let's say your opponent is using DOS plus Kyogre and they're able to taunt you or magical you and deny you getting up hazards. When they bring their own Kyogre in and they click Water Spout or Surf, your team has to have a switch in or you're just going to lose a Pokemon. Whenever you're building any Black-White Ubers team, you need to account for Kyogre and have at least one or two checks to it, or else you're probably are going to be in very trouble if you ever play a Kyogre. So I feel like it kind of influences the whole metagame and how you build your teams. So I feel like it's definitely deserving of its rank, and I would even say it's marginally better than any other Pokemon in the metagame except maybe Arceus. So maybe my opinion is a little bit different from others, but that's what I think about Kyogre.
That's fair.
No,
that's fair.
I feel like I feel like I have that same opinion. It's just that, well, I think I would compare it if you compare it to like Primal Groudon, for example, in Auras. I don't think it comes close. I just think it's really, really good, and it's the best Pokemon in the tier, but no doubt about that. But yeah.
One of the things I like about Kyogre that I forgot to mention is that you can check it offensively. So, like, some of its best checks in the Lottie Twins are also offensive threats in their own right. And that can sometimes help you switch into it without having to use a true wall like a Ferrothorn and actually threaten back with offense. And that's really big because with those big guns like Kyogre, then you have the choice of, okay, well, I can switch into it, but I'm going to have to use a wall to do it. And obviously you don't want to throw on walls on really offensive teams. And when you have those really offensive teams, then you are at like Blim said, like you are at risk of losing Pokemon immediately to Kyogre because you can't afford to run that kind of wall. So that's part of what makes it so good, and that's part of what makes the Lotties so good, of course, in that they're very unique in being able to switch into Kyogre and be an offensive threat in its own right, in their own right. But then on the other hand, of course, Kyogre could just Thunder Wave them, and they're ruined. So just another part of what makes Kyogre so good. Okay, so Kyogre is amazing. So let's move on to Genesect, who I know is considered by many to be the face of Gen 5 Ubers. So whoever wants to take the floor on Genesect, go ahead. But I'll just preface it by saying I have never seen a non-Scarf Genesect in a serious Gen 5 Ubers match. Not when it was an SPL, not in anything since. So I know there's some variation to Scarf, like physical or special, but for the most part, Genesect's defining feature is its stab, download boost, often download boosted U-turns, and the tier is so shaped by it that Pokemon with equal defenses, such as Darkrai, then they'll often EV themselves with 4 defense instead of 4 special defense, because that way the download boost goes to special attack, so you're not giving Genesect a free boosted U-turn against a Pokemon that it has a free U-turn on, like Darkrai. So, and of course Genesect exploits that with the special set, which preys on the fact that it gets free +1 special attack. But yeah, I just wanted to lay the groundwork of what Genesect does. So now you guys tell us why Genesect is so freakishly good with just that Scarf set.
I feel like I have to start here somehow. Right. Let's see.
I'll go last on this one.
Yeah, I feel like when you talked about people that that consider Genesect the face of Black and White Ubers, probably I'm one of those people. I mean, Genesect is like, it's kind of a strange one because it's not the strongest, it's not the bulkiest, it's not the fastest, but the metagame revolves so much around hazard control and playing with momentum with your hazards. And in that regard, I think Genesect just fits so well into the metagame. Because suddenly you have a mon that completely allows you to dictate the tempo, can allow you to gain back tempo. I mean, a very common play to gain back tempo is sometimes to switch your Genesect into another Genesect's U-turn, so you can yourself U-turn on whatever comes in to give yourself a risk-free switch in without risking the opponent to double switch, right? Because that's the benefit of U-turn. So for me, I would just say, if you ever played, you know how good Genesect is. And obviously we can go through the list of what it can revenge kill easily with U-turn or Ice Beam, which is commonly used on every set. And I mean, those include Darkrai, Mewtwo, Larios, Shaman Sky, Zekrom, yeah. And it even has somewhat of a good matchup versus Arceus Ghost in certain cases, and Arceus Normal, being able to resist Ghost and Normal. It also resists Dark. So I think a lot of people have become so accustomed to these that Steel doesn't resist these moves anymore, but it's really relevant in Black and White. So yeah, maybe not the most concise answer about what it exactly does, but it's also, you know it when you see it. You know what Genesect does when you see it. It's exactly what you would imagine it to do. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it still dominates, so it's I guess that's what makes the good Ubers poke so good. The fact that you don't always know it's coming makes them even better, but even if you knew exactly what it did, it would just click U-turn and do its thing anyway. So yeah, Edgar, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Genesect is one of the reasons why hyper offense is so prominent and is to this day so scary. Because before Genesect was released, hyper offense, or before people became woke of Genesect in Black and White 2, hyper offense was active, but it wasn't what it is now, or you wouldn't find it to the extent that you find it now. And that's a reason, because that's a good reason why Genesect is so good. because alongside hazards and spikes and stuff like that, those U-turns and those ice beams, those iron heads kind of hurt. So even if you switch out into a check or something that resists its moves, you're going to be taking hazards damage. Also, Genesect. So I'm talking a little bit more about the impact that Genesect had here. It made a lot of Pokemon harder to use. It made Rayquaza harder to use. Arceus Dark, Shaymin, Mewtwo, because it's a really good Pokemon in general. Just having like raw Scarf, strong U-turn, has a lot of impact to what teams have to prepare for, and the utility that Pokemon has. Just to give an example, +1 U-turn does 60% to 0 HP, 0 defense Kyogre, and it's a Pokemon that always outspeeds it. So that Kyogre player is always forced to switch out unless it basically wants to lose its Pokemon for no reason. It also learns Explosion. So in dire situations, when you feel like you really need to get rid of something, and Genesect gets the +1, or doesn't even need the +1 in some cases, you can explode and get rid of that Pokemon. So, in my opinion, it's a really good Pokemon. Well, I said that already, but I would agree that is, I guess, the most splashable Scarfer, or splashable offensive threat in offense in general.
Its Iron Heads, especially when boosted, are deceptively strong, because you would think that a bulky Arceus will be able to take it just fine, but it's often not the case, and there have been many tournament games where suddenly a healthy Arceus is at low health or even KO'd because Genesect decided to become Jirachi. And then, of course, it can also go the... Sorry?
It does like 40% to max HP Arceus, so it gets 2 flinches or 1 flinch after Stealth Rocks and Spikes, and it's over.
Yeah, especially good against Ghost Arceus, which is trying to hit Focus Blast through that flinch, and Recover Stalling is just begging for more trouble, so it can be really nasty. Of course, it can also sweep you just with the special attack boost, because usually it runs the physical Scarf set, and so it has those really strong invested +1 U-turns and Iron Heads, but then it it preys on that assumption that it's going to be getting +1 special attack, and starts spamming really strong special attacks. I don't know what moves it uses. I guess it's dependent on the team, but the really scary one I've seen is Sun Flamethrower, which with +1 is really, really tough to switch into. So.
Yeah, and you have thunder for rain as well. So, so you get the thunder in rain and flamethrower sun, and always the bug boss, of course, which is underrated. So
bug boss is scary.
Yeah, it's
also
crazy cleaning potential.
Yeah, Blim, go ahead.
One thing I want to stress about Genesect is by itself, Genesect isn't the strongest Pokemon. It's not the biggest offensive threat. It doesn't have the greatest bulk. But the reason why it's called the face of Black White Uber is because of how well it fits into the metagame and what it checks and counters. Like it checks, like piggybacking off what Hack said, it checks Darkrai, Mewtwo, Latios. It can check E-Killer, Arceus Grass, Arceus Dark. And because how strong hazards are in the metagame, usually Stealth Rocks and Spikes are going to be up. And let's say you have a Koga and it clicks Water Sprout coming in, and the Latios comes in. Latios is most likely going to click Recover, and then you can go right back into your Genesect, click U-turn, and then assuming hazards is up, you just get so much more momentum just off of that simple core. And it fits so well on various offensive teams. So I just wanted to stress that about how Genesect.
Yeah, I now remember a little bit like this Specs Kyogre Genesect style. It's so iconic of Black and White to just keep pressuring your Kyogre check by switching in Genesect and getting those U-turns. That's like Black and White in a nutshell almost. That's the first thing you learn. If you can't get stuck in those loops because you will lose.
Alright, so that's Genesect. It's amazing. So, Arceus Ghost is next up. So, why is Arceus Ghost good besides the fact that it spin blocks? Because it's not a perfect spin blocker. It doesn't love Sand Excadrill. It doesn't love Tentacruel and Rain. It doesn't love Rain Kabutops. But it's, of course, an Arceus, so it is, good in a nutshell against all those Pokemon. And what makes Arceus Ghost specifically so good, besides just its spin blocking? Because spin blocking is a big deal, but, it's not all that Arceus Ghost is.
Yeah, I would say. I would say that Arceus Ghost. I would say what makes Arceus Ghost so good is that its versatility is usually a calm mindset, but it can also run forward stance. It has incredible bulk, and it's also just an incredible sweeper after +1. And that's pretty much in a nutshell what makes it so good. I'll let Edgar or Hack explain it in a little bit more detail.
Basically, parting from what Blim said, its versatility not only for the calm mindset, which can run two variants, the bulky one that takes hits for days, and the offensive one, which could also do a lot of damage. Arceus Ghost also has a lot of variance when it comes to support sets, because since it has base 120 speed, you can just run max HP, max speed, and outspeed stuff like Latias and Palkia, and you can even check a killer if you carry Will-O-Wisp. So having that so many options makes it such a good Pokemon to run on any team, even if you're just looking for a spin blocker. It's a spin blocker that also lanes fire moves. So given the right set, you can just Flamethrower Fortress, or even Surf. I've seen Hack run Surf on Rain. Arceus goes to check in Excadrill. And overall, you can also run Stealth Rock on it. So you have a spin blocker that is also Stealth Rock user. And if you run Will-O-Wisp and you burn the right Pokemon, it basically becomes immortal. I've seen so many, I guess, parting a little bit from what the Pokemon is, it is also a very soft check to offense when it comes to the support set, because a lot of Pokemon that are used in offense don't like to get burned or are outsped by that Pokemon. So one of the niches that actually recently it gained is that it can Will-O-Wisp a lot of offensive sets, or offensive teams rather, and it can also run. It can also run Roar, and with hazards that actually is really devastating, because with Will-O-Wisp Roar support, you really can ask for a better, and Recover, you really can ask for a better support Pokemon.
I guess we have to talk about why it's not in S tier, why it's not considered the best Pokemon, because we're sounding quite like it's probably the best, and for a long time it was actually considered probably the best Pokemon in the tier. But I always felt like Arceus Ghost, while everything you said is correct and everything, and it is great, it's very theoretical when it comes to all the sets and the percentages you get out of it. Because if the calm mindset is succeed, you probably have to hit Focus Blasts. And it's not like it has to hit every single Focus Blast, because it can afford missing. And same with support sets, it has to hit the Will-O-Wisp sometimes. So it's a little bit more like on the theoretical side with those low accuracy moves. That in practice it becomes sort of sometimes it gets checked by Genesect, which shouldn't really happen, but the flinch chance is 30%, and you have to hit Focus Blast because Genesect hit Resist Judgment. So in practice, it gets a lot of trouble, actually. So that's, I think, why it's not considered the best Pokemon anymore. In theory, though, it's unbelievable. And for me personally, I think I like the Stealth Rock set the most, because it's just such a unique niche to have the speed, the spin block, and the Stealth Rock on the same set. And you can still check like half the metagame with Judgment and Will-O-Wisp. But still, I mean, it relies a little bit on percentages. So that's somewhat dragging it down in practice.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Recently, I found that the Stealth Rock set, out of all of them, is the most consistent. Mostly because hazards are guaranteed, and also you have access to Will-O-Wisp. So even if you're not relying on Arceus just to check threats. You're also setting up hazards, and that's why, since it's a really good hazard setter, like the consistency that it has on matches, at least from what I played and from what I've witnessed, it's actually it's the most consistent set that I've seen in recent times.
I have to fill in. I have to fill in about Will-O-Wisp, just that the fast Will-O-Wisp versus Arceus normal means that you can technically check an Arceus normal at 1%, which nothing else can. And that's insanely good in theory.
That's really good.
I just want to make a quick point about the Stealth Rock. I just want to add that the Stealth Rock Arceus Ghost set also does a really good job of screwing over Espeon, Exu, plus Ho-Ho Sun teams, and that's a reason why a lot of good players like using that set.
That's a really big one because those teams are really popular and surprisingly annoying. And later we will get to why Espeon, of all things, is used in Ubers, but it is as legitimate as any other team you'd see in a serious tournament. And I wanted to mention about the Stealth Rock Arceus Ghost that another reason, well, Edgar kind of touched upon it, because sometimes you use Arceus Ghost to check things, and then you don't really get much out of it besides just recovering and not being able to sweep with Calm Mind. But when you're getting up rocks and throwing around Will-O-Wisps, then you're able to achieve a lot more, just by virtue of how useful those moves are against nearly any switch-in, as opposed to Calm Mind, which needs a lot of stuff to go its way before it's ready to really go for the sweep. Another thing I wanted to mention, Hack mentioned percentages, and for me it's not so much the accuracy of its moves, although that is annoying, but it's more the fact that it can't run leftovers, and that's really big on a Pokemon that takes as many hits and needs to stay as healthy as Arceus Ghost. I mean, it's on the Calm Mind set. If Arceus Ghost could run leftovers, then Genesect would be so much worse against it, because it could get recover stalled really easily. But even on the defensive set, although there it's not as bad because you're weakening so many things with Will-O-Wisp, and you recover on most things anyway. Like, the prominence of bulky Arceus in general is why mixed Rayquaza is almost never seen, and as opposed to in DPP, where it will pretty much KO something almost automatically unless you have a Lugia. But against a lot of other things, then with how prominent hazards are, then you really notice the fact that if you want to heal, you have to take a turn to do it, and you're not getting that 6% every turn. So I just wanted to add that point. So that's Arceus Ghost. It is really an excellent Pokemon. Go ahead.
Something quick. So Arceus Ghost, also, it takes, I think it's 73 to 81% from Life Orb Draco Meteor, from Life Orb Dialga, Max Special Attack Dialga. So a lot of that it has for it too is that it sometimes can switch into really strong Draco Meteors and just recover it off. So that's also unique. Yeah.
You don't even have to resist Draco to switch it, and that's really big, because one of the things about DPP Ubers is that Draco is very often just a KO button, and there aren't many steals that can take it, let alone non-steals. And in Gen 5 Ubers, then you have this monster that doesn't even have to resist the move to shrug it off. I mean, it's not an automatic thing, you know, like with rocks and maybe spikes, and maybe if the Dialga is specs, then you're not going to be taking that easily. But it's just having that option, especially against something like Mixed Rayquaza, because Arceus Ghost can't even get extreme speeded, so you really just recover in its face. So, yeah, that's Ghost for you. Now on to another spin blocker who is also just an amazing Pokemon in general, Giratina Origin. Now, this Pokemon is much different from its Gen 4 counterpart. So you don't have that classic mix set with Draco, Shadow Sneak. It exists still, but you don't really see that as much as some of the other sets that it's kind of started using, like with the Magic Coat buff and the addition of Dragon Tail and stuff. So what does Giratina Origin use, and what is its role besides just, lull spin blocking?
Well, I think.
Oh, you want to lead off, Ergo? Okay.
I think so. I think Giratina Origin, it has a lot of variety in terms of doing the same thing, but what makes it like such a good Pokemon is that its priority move also, Shadow Sneak, is super effective against a lot of the threats, and also the access to Dragon Tail. It's one of the strongest Dragon Tails in the game, if not the strongest.
I think it is the strongest because it has not just stab and a high attack stat, but because it always has the Grisius Orb boost. So
yeah, so switching into Giratina Origin, I get with a physically defensive Pokemon is not that let's say viable, because you're gonna be most of the times you're gonna be taking Dragon Tail damage plus hazards. But the thing is that Giratina Origin, the thing that also adds in is that it can run Magic Code for Lead Spikers, Hidden Power Fire for Ferrothorn or Fortress. So it's a very versatile spin blocker, and it also, the thing that also has for it is that it's a ground immunity with having Levitate, so it can switch into stuff like Excadrill. Even on sand, it can switch in and Will-O-Wisp it, or just Dragon Tail it out, or hit it with the Q. So overall, it's a very versatile Pokemon that can achieve a lot of things with very limited sets or very limited moves, and very limited EV spreads. I think the best EV spread for it is to achieve such a thing is run max defense with some attack and some speed. It actually does a lot of things, but mainly the thing is that it sponges hits and Dragon Tails Pokemon out. Dragon Tails Pokemon like Extreme Killer Arceus, Rock Polish Groudon, Swords Dance Escadrille, stuff like that.
All right, yeah, Garrett. I would say that Giratina Origin, from what I understand, its most popular set right now is Substitute. The sub on obviously passive Pokemon such as Ferrothorn, Chansey, Blissey, Technicruel, Heatran, etc., Earthquake, and Dragon Tail. And the reason why that set is the most popular is because of, again, how strong Stealth Rocks and Spikes are. You just substitute on the passive Pokemon and just keep clicking Dragon Tail. I mean, I'm sure people who have watched any Black White game have seen that happen multiple times. And Giratina Origin, that particular set, and also the Rest, Sleep Talk, Roar set with either enough speed to outspeed Groudon, or you can just go max speed, just to outphase opposing phases, is actually one of the main reasons that Stall really struggles in this tier, because a lot of passive Pokemon can't do anything to Giratina, and you just keep clicking Roar and Dragon Tail, and with hazards up, and then it just becomes a mess for the defensive team.
yeah, that's all right. I remember that Rest, Sleep Talk, Dragon Tail, Roar set. I mean, it sounds like a joke, but it's really, really nasty. Because one of the things about Sub Giratina is that it sometimes has to be careful about switching in. Like, if it wants to spin block Tentacruel, then it really cannot afford to take a Scald Burn, because then you're really, really in trouble. But with the Rest Talk set, then it's kind of like Kyogre in that, yeah, Rest Talk can kind of be really terrible in Gen 5 because of the awful sleep mechanics, but it has a significant enough niche and these Pokemon can stay in on so much and just keep going, so they can often wake up. And with the Dragon Tail Roar Rest Talk set, then you just spin block Tentacruel forever, and you don't have to worry about switching into a Leech Seed or getting randomly Scald Burned by a Kyogre also, for instance. So it lets you be a lot more aggressive with it rather than try. But of course, then on the other hand, with Sub, then you become one of the most difficult Pokemon to deal with. Like, you can't get Leech Seeded, that's already huge. And you are just... The cool thing about it is that you phase in Pokemon over and over, and then you just pick them off with Shadow Sneak, and both moves are boosted, and Giratina is really strong. So you were just going wilds against significant portions of their core, especially if you get in a groove with your phasing rolls. So, anything else on Giratina?
I wanna... It's a little bit matchup dependent, though, for me, because... it clearly does really well versus bulkier teams, where it can rest and stuff like that. But sometimes, if you don't get your hazard game right, for example, we can talk about how it dreads facing Ho-Oh. If Stealth Rocks are not up, it can get to be a real liability. So I think Giratina O is similar to Genesect. It's not in itself the best Pokemon, but the way it fits into the tier is very interesting and special. But it is a Pokemon that is to be used with entry hazards and with a clear goal in mind, how to get those entry hazards up and how to get something out of it. If you don't do that, it can be a real liability, actually. So it's one of those examples where it's the dynamics of the tier that makes the mon, not the mon itself, I feel like.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Hack, anything before we move on? I think Hack disappeared. Oh.
Did I?
Well,
Oh, I thought you. Do you want to say anything on GO?
No.
No. All right.
Oh, did I disappear when I talked before?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Never mind. I think
It's whatever. Let's move on to the next one.
all right. Next up, we have. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say one last thing about Giratina O is that while it does have some liabilities, it does have good roll compression, and that obviously it's a spin blocker, and it frees up your Arceus form. And with Will-O-Wisp, it's a very nifty check to things like Groudon, which can oddly be difficult for teams to check if you don't have another answer for it, especially for all offensive teams where you really want to switch into that Earthquake.
Yeah, also, Giratina is also used when you're using Arceus in some other set. So, like, Arceus and Giratina usually go hand in hand in terms of, like, you're using Arceus and you're using Giratina to spin block, or sometimes you just use Arceus Ghost and not use Giratina, or you want to use another Arceus slot and spin block with Giratina, things like that.
Stuff. So, I remember in Black and White 1 when we saw a few teams with Arceus Ghost and Giratina Origin, and I always thought those were just the coolest, but you don't see those too much nowadays, sadly. But then again, Darkrai exists, so. Okay, next up, we have Groudon. So, Groudon, on one hand, you think, okay, yeah, I know what Groudon does, Stealth Rock, Sun, cool. But on the other hand, it has a lot of variety to its sets as well. And I gotta say, I haven't seen like a truly defensive Groudon in a long time, which I think is really cool. It's mostly shades of all these offensive sets, like Earth Plate, really, really common. Like Rocks, Earth Plate, Fire Punch. Fire Punch or Lava Plume, actually. Lava Plume is nasty for burning bulky Arceus forms, Lottie switch-ins, and of course, making sure that Fortress and Skarmory and Ferrothorn stay out of your face. And then the last move, usually Stone Edge, because Ho-Oh is a pain. So, and I remember it was Jolly Earthplate specifically because people were leading off with Specs Dialga and Draco Meteoring Groudons before they could do anything. So, I don't know if that's still the standard, but I've seen, like, generally offensive Rocks Groudons. And, of course, if there's a DOSHO team, then you'll generally have something like a Life Orb Rock Polish set. So, what's going on with Groudon? What's it using? And what does it facilitate besides, obviously, Sun stuff?
Right. I can go ahead if possible. I feel like Groudon, more for practical purposes, I think the special defense set outclasses everything else, and I feel like it's such a good utility mon, and it's not because how it was conceived in the beginning. Having special defense on Groudon sort of was thought of as a way to switch into Kyogre to reset the weather, and then get your Sun up and start fueling stuff like Ho-Oh, Reshiram, whatever. No, I feel like just standalone special defense helps for it to tank every single hit it needs to. So you were talking about Specs Dialgas, but special defense Groudon gets those opportunities to get an option to take the Draco Meteor from a Latios to Thunderwave it, and then get those Stealth Rocks up. It gets so many more options to support adequately. And it even can run a Lumberry, so you can get the Thunderwave off on Darkrai in the 1-to-1 situation. So it's very, I feel for practical purposes, this was always my favorite. But because also it's still really bulky on the physical side. So if you ran like Dragon Tail, you could still check Arceus normal, for example. But special defense on Groudon for me patches up most of its flaws in such a great way. So I'm a big advocate, and I think it has great synergy with Kyogre, for example, because both are checked by Latias and Latios. You get Groudon into Thunder Wave, a Latias, and then your Kyogre is suddenly faster, and they can't really tank those specs, Ward Spouts or Surfs that well when you have a faster Kyogre. So, and then obviously we have the more iconic sets with Rock Polish. We have the Double Dance set with Rock Polish and Sword Dance and Lumberry, and those are all fine. But for me, it was always in practical terms special defensive that just never failed really. Low risk and always rewarding to use. So, and I personally think that Groudon is probably top 4 in the tier. So
that's high praise. I was really interested that you mentioned Groudon and Kyogre being used together because I love their synergy together, but I felt like one of the biggest changes about Gen 5 Ubers was that I felt like I stopped seeing them on the same team as much, whereas in the previous 2 generations of Ubers, you would see them on the same team quite often, and I'm not saying they're unviable together or anything like that, but I felt like the general perspective shifted to be more of abusing your own weather, and thus you would run Groudon alongside Ho-Oh and a bunch of sun-abusing stuff, and you wouldn't want Kyogre getting in the way, and you would see a lot more Kyogre in addition to Kabutops, and this in conjunction with them having to fight T-Tar alongside Excadrill and stuff. So you've seen a lot of Groudon and Kyogre like together instead of just facing off?
I think that for me it's one of the best pairings. I think the synergy is very clear with the Latios and Latias matchups, and especially with special defensive where you always guarantee you can support your Kyogre with your Groudon. So for me, I think that pairing is just excellent. There are so few drawbacks with using these mons because they're so good in themselves.
That's solid. And I guess if you face Sand, because Sand is really good, then you have as many tools to win the Weather War as possible. So, yeah. So that's Groudon. Edgar, Blim, you guys want to add on Groudon?
Yeah, definitely. I would say Groudon, I would agree with Hank, is that it's definitely, for me, a top 4 Pokemon in the tier. Just because it's extremely versatile. Like Hank said, you could go especially defensive with Thunder Wave, Earthquake, Stealth Rock, and Dragon Tail. And it's very easy to lure in the Paralyzed or Arceus or Latias or Latias and Latios and Latias, sorry. And it's a very good pairing with Kyogre. And it's also, I think its offensive sets are being, you really have to be careful of offensive Groudon because it can either go Rock Polish, Sword Stance, Earthquake, and Stone Age, or it could just go Stealth Rock with +3 attacks, with that 3rd attack being Fire Punch, the lure of Skarmory. And that's very dangerous, especially if you pair it up with a Sword Stance Arceus normal. That's one of the most potent cores of the tier. Sword Stance Groudon and Sword Stance Arceus normal.
I also want to point out. Yeah. I also want to point out that the synergy of Kyogre supported by Groudon works the other way as well, because Kyogre could feasibly Thunder Wave the Latios, right? And then you could use something like Life Orb Groudon with Dragon Claw just to knock those out. And you would also probably gain a lot of good counterplay to rest Giratina by having a Dragon Claw Groudon as opposed to a Dragon Tail Groudon, which obviously a special defensive Kyogre with Thunder Wave would hate facing off Giratina. So the synergy works both ways. And we haven't even mentioned Arceus Grass. So, or actually you said that with the Fire Punch. So, yeah, I think that pairing is just phenomenal. You can do so much with it.
Right, definitely. Especially with Dragon Tail, if you can just keep repeatedly hitting Giratina O with it. And once their Giratina O gets weakened, that really frees up your Arceus normal to sweep later on.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like Stahl has such a tough time keeping up with the tier. Like, I admire anyone who tries, but it's not just that these Pokemon are so strong, but the fact that it's not even about power as much as these top-tier Pokemon can throw on... I mean, look at all these top-tier Pokemon that can just throw on a phasing move. You got Kyogre, Giratina Origin, Groudon, and Latios, and sometimes even like an Arceus form. And it's not just handling the offensive assault, it's handling this offensive assault that's also shuffling you around and forcing and weakening Pokemon that you don't even want hitting the field. So, well, that's a subject for later. So, Groudon, really good. Edgar, do you want to add anything?
I agree with everything they said.
All right.
No. I think like we said, a lot of the top tier Pokemon in Ubers are really versatile. So Groudon is not the exception, as Blim and Hack said. Like the Thunder Wave set can really help you bypass a lot of things, or set up like a later sweep and Dragon Tail in general. Just a reference, for example, after two Stealth Rock switchings, Latios Dragon Tail KOs Latios. So if a Latios switches in, it dies. And also, I like that Hack mentioned support Groudon with Dragon Claw, because that's something that I really like, because the main switching is Giratina Origin, and Giratina Origin doesn't have leftovers either. So the damage is permanent. So something that I really like, I think the most consistent sets are the support sets, in that they are very versatile. I think Rock Polish is a little harder to pull in this metagame, but I think support definitely has a lot of space of maneuvering in the current Uber's metagame.
Would you say that Rock Polish is harder to pull off because you can't really use Groudon defensively, and with the others you can just kind of throw them into attacks and still get use out of them?
Yeah, and also the four move syndrome, because you want Fire Punch to hit Skarmory or even Air Balloon Excadrill if you don't have a Fire Punch. If it has the balloon intact, you're gonna take a hit plus the life orb you have, and if you don't have Dragon Claw, you cannot bypass a lot of checks. So I'd say support in that regard is more consistent, because you can achieve what Groudon is supposed to achieve easier.
All right, awesome. I will just say one of my favorite things about Groudon is I personally really like Scarf Zekrom, because Volt Switch is just amazing, and Groudon just completely stuffs it. And like you can't even outrage or anything. So Groudon makes Scarf Zekrom really hard to pull off, and I always appreciate that about it. But we'll get to Zekrom later. Next up, Dialga. Dialga generally goes well. Okay, that's not true. You have its. You don't see the bulk up set really ever, but I feel like you see a good blend of Life Orb or Choice Specs, and then sometimes you get like pure support. The same kind of supporting anti-Kyogre Stealth Rock set, and now it also has the benefit of throwing around Thunders and roaring around, and it has to be a little more careful because you actually have a really good answer to it in the tier in the form of a bulky Rain Excadrill. But other than that, what's up with Dialga?
Well, as the biggest Dialga fanboy, it would be wrong if I didn't lead it off. So, I mean, Dialga, it's just extremely versatile. It basically does everything. It fits on every play style, and it can do anything you need for your team. The most common set is the support set with Stealth Rock, Draco Meter, or Dragon Pulse, Thunder or Fire Blast, and with the last move being Roar or Dragon Tail. It gets up rocks very easily, and versus like the passive Pokemon such as Ferrothorn, Chanseys, Blissies, Technicruels, things like that, it's very easy to just roar them out in the constant just phase spam the opposing team. But Dialga, it can also be an offensive threat with the Life Orb set. Usually more people are running max speed, the speed tie or the outspeed opposing base 90, such as Groudons and Kogers and opposing Dialgas. And on the offensive set with Life Orb, you're usually running Stealth Rock again, Draco Meteor, Thunder, and Aura Spear, which is very key for hitting Ferrothorn, Heatrons, Dialgas, Technicruels. In that specific Life Orb set, it's like one of the best balance breakers in the tier. Even like as Edgar mentioned earlier, in the Arceus doesn't really want to switch into that Life Orb boosted Draco Meter, especially if you have Stealth Rock and Spikes up. So Dialga, it's just a very destructive Pokemon, especially in the hands of a good player who knows what they're doing. I could just go on and on about Dialga. It's just amazing.
I think we have to talk about how impossible it is for some teams to just beat bulky Dialga. Like they can't. So many teams can't actually kill a bulky Dialga.
Yeah, steel typing goes a really long way.
Yeah, that actually something that characterizes Dialga and Palkia to an extent as well is that if you don't have anything that resists fire in rain, you are not able to check them. Like there's nothing in the tier that switches into the combination of Draco Meteor plus Thunder or Draco Meteor plus Fire Blast or Aura Sphere. So they are really threatening Pokemon, and Dialga, what it has also offensively going for it is that it can run Choice Scarf, and it is an extreme killer Arceus check because it resists extreme speed. So what a lot of teams do when they run Scarf Dialga is that they just chip the Arceus a little bit and rely on Dialga to check with either Aura Sphere or Draco Meteor. And since it's a really strong Pokemon, it does it reliably. And also the Scarf Dialga set, which is something that I really like nowadays. By itself, with hazard support, it actually sweeps teams with Dragon Pulse if they are worn down enough, or nothing switches into Draco Meteor. I've also been experimented with some Dialga sets. I've been running. This is a little bit off topic, I think, but I've been running Toxic Protect, and it also does so much for defensive teams because since it's a Steel type and it get access to Fire Blast, it also stops the offensive momentum that Hyper Offense teams have for it. They need to rely on very specific Pokemon to break such a Pokemon like Dialga.
So is it Toxic Protect, Fire, Dragon Pulse?
Yeah, Fire Blast
that's
and
brutal.
Dragon Pulse.
That's really brutal.
So since it also has pressure, a lot of Pokemon like Kyogre that rely on moves like Hydro Pump or Water Spout, or even Arceus Ghost that relies on Focus Blast to hit it hard, it can stall them out with Protect and the combination of Toxic. So defensively and offensively, it's such a reliable Pokemon. Not to mention that it also has a Trick Room set that is a little like a little niche, like a gimmick. Nice. But I've used it on some offenses, and I've seen it on some offensive teams from other players, and you don't expect it on Team Preview because it's really uncommon. So they always expect the last Pokemon Dialga to be something like Choice Scarf. So when they set up Trick Room, it's basically a good game.
Yeah, Dialga is one of those mons that you can actually use in this tier to surprise your opponent. Like, you can actually feasibly change up your team structure so that it's impossible to know what your Dialga will do. And I don't think any Pokemon actually can do this in the tier other than Dialga.
Exactly.
I would say that's accurate.
Dialga, yeah. I would say that Dialga. I talked to Tony a lot about this, but if Dialga had a Rock Polish set, or it learned Rock Polish or something that could boost its speed, it would be a perfect Pokemon. Like, it's so hard to check. It's unreal.
Maybe we can just give it Quiver Dance or something. I'm sure that would be balanced. I wanted to say a few things. First, there's nothing like Choice Specs Dialga. It's simple, but it just destroys everything. Second, what I really like about Dialga as an offensive Pokemon, you compared it to Palkia as a wall breaker, and they are really similar, and we'll get to Palkia soon, but it's really, really, like, no matter what weather you're in, then it's really just about impossible to check a lot of Dialga sets and Palkia safely, and it's great in rain and in sun, and one of the actually, several of the cool things about Dialga is that Steel typing just does so many things for it. Like in sand, then Palkia might get worn down, but not for Dialga. And another great thing about Dialga is that, unlike Palkia, it resists U-turn. So Genesect can't just say, oh, you're at 50%, well, now you die. In fact, Dialga is really good against pretty much everything Genesect can do, unless it's a +1 sun-boosted Flamethrower. And even that obviously doesn't come close to KOing, but like Dialga takes its hits really, really comfortably. and it can just do pretty much anything. Can run T-Wave if you really want. It can. Dialga is like a perfect Pokemon, pretty much. It has like its flaws are just like they're hardly even flaws. They're just like the things that prevent it from being completely broken. So yeah, Dialga is incredible. And
Palkia speed would be broken.
Yeah, I guess the only flaw is that it doesn't hard counter anything offensively.
Yeah.
So it obviously it's like it's like Snorlax in GSC versus a lot of the metagame actually when it comes to how hard it is for like niche things to kill it, right? So like the Tentacruise, the Ferrothorns, they can't really touch it. But unlike Gold, Silver, Crystal, Snorlax, you can't really check the big offensive threats with Dialga. Like it's not a good Kyogre switch, and it's not a great Palkia switch. Obviously, it works at times, but it's not to be relied upon.
For sure.
So it's not a hard counter to anything noteworthy, and that's probably the only flaw.
Yeah, a lot of it is Dialga doesn't really. It also depends on your team and what you're using it for. But you're right, Dialga doesn't really hard counter anything, but it soft checks pretty much everything, which is insane on a Pokemon as offensively threatening as it is. So
yeah, it goes 1-to-1 with everything in the tier, save for certain Groudon and Excadrill sets, I would say.
Yeah. And it's a dragon not weak to dragon, which is in and of itself already amazing. So, right. Okay, so next up we have Latios, which is ranked quite significantly higher than maybe not significantly higher, but it is higher than Latios. So we know what Latios does. It offensively checks Kyogre, and it's a massive, massive threat in its own right. So what does Dialga? What does Latios do exactly, and why is it so preferred over Latios? Is the extra power that significant?
I wouldn't say it's that preferred over Latios personally.
Yeah.
But so maybe we can talk about both here. But Latios is probably the most use wall breaker in the tier because it's so hazard resilient, right? So you get it in on a lot of things, like Kyogre, which runs commonly special defensive sets, can't touch it. So Latios has the speed tier that is completely outshines the other dragons in the tier, which makes it so that really all the other dragons are benchmarking against each other, but Latios doesn't really care about that, right? So I think that's the big draw, and it obviously has a lot of defensive utility versus Kyogre and Groudon. So to keep it short, you press Draco Meteor, and you never die, because Pursuit Trapping, unlike OU, is not that easy to pull off. It has been done, but it's not as reliable, and it's not nearly as splashable. So Latios will stay around, and it will keep dropping Draco Meteors. So
yeah, it's pretty much you can U-turn on it with Genesect, but you can't switch into it with Genesect, and you have to withstand Latios several times. And I'm glad you mentioned Draco Meteor, regardless of if it's Latios or Latias, because one of the unique things about Gen 5 is that Latias runs Draco Meteor a lot, which it hasn't always before or after Gen 5. So why would Latias run Draco Meteor when it's so much weaker than... It's not weak, but it's weaker than Latios. So, but it runs like sets that are exactly like Latios, like the Roar, Psyshock, Recover stuff.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the point I wanted to get into before when I say we can talk about both. Because for me, some teams are just, in theory... They can't run Latios because the bulk is actually required in Ubers sometimes. And examples of those teams would be where you run a heavy beat down rain offense, where you don't use a special defense Kyogre, for example. You run maybe Specs Kyogre, and then you rely on a Lati Twin to be your own Kyogre check, right? So an example would be maybe using something like this, a Sash T-Tar or Sash Garchomp plus a Darkrai, plus a Specs Kyogre and an Arceus Fighting and a Genesect. And then you would think, well, I can use Latios here, but you actually really can't. You have to use Latias for the extra bulk here, even though the team in itself is very offensive. Sometimes you just need as opposed to more actually balanced teams where you can run Latios a lot more because you have a bigger backbone to support it against Kyogre. But now you suddenly have to rely on a Lati Twin to check Kyogre. Well, then I think you can look at Latias. And then you simply just run the offensive set of a Latios, but on a Latias instead. And I mean, it will still do a lot of damage, and you will get that extra bulk. So that's sort of how I view it. Certain teams just can't run Latios without risking too much in Ubers.
I think. Well, we were talking about this yesterday. I think that the reason why Latios sets are so, or Latios is the preferred to go Pokemon is because offensive teams are like have an easier time feeding Latios than Latias because they often procure hazards very early in the game. So by the time Latias starts coming in, like nothing switching into Draco Meteor plus Psyshock or something, or the coverage move that he has. The difference that he has over Latias, like Hack said, is that when team needs bulk, like Latias should be your go-to Lati, in my opinion. And I actually have something to add on Latias. I've actually found out that Dragon Pulse on Latias is actually better than Draco Meteor, because often you use Latias alongside defensive Pokemon, and using Draco Meteor is actually a liability because you have to switch out, and as BKC said, it's not as strong as Latias is. But Dragon Pulse with hazards up or just Stealth Rock up are also a 2-hit KO on a lot of things. So I think that's the big difference between those two. I also think something that makes Latios a very good Pokemon is that when it gets worn down, it also can use Memento and use the momentum to set up with some Pokemon, which I actually have some offenses like that. For example, where I use Memento and I set up with my late game sweeper and just proceed to clean the game.
Because setting up E-Killer wasn't easy enough?
Yeah. Or just you can set up like even sub CM Ghost use stuff like that.
Or you use it to anti-setup, right? But
yeah,
you
or
minus yeah.
Like E-Killer usually does this, and that's why Memento is so useful, because E-Killer comes in at -2 on Draco Meteors all the time. On -2 Draco Meteor users all the time, so it sets up Sword Dance, and Latios just reverts that back, and it's really useful in general.
And this would work on on last mon E-Killer as well, which Roar doesn't. But Roar is generally a preferred option, I feel, these days on Latios, because I personally like the Draco, Thunder, Roar, and Cover sets on Latios. They just stay around. They get the 30% paralysis chance with Thunder as well, and it's a really strong move. And that's really my favorite set.
I also want to add up that Latios by itself is not like the most reliable Kyogre check, mostly because even Scarf Ice Beam to hit KOs it. So it can switch in, but you need to run something else that can resist the move, which is something that Latias doesn't need to do. You can just switch in Latias on any Kyogre move, and it's gonna expects to hit KOs, but I guess you can run something else with it. But for example, what expects Water Spout does a lot more to Latias than it does to Latias. So if you want to check that, you're going to lose a lot more HP than you would do with using Latias if you're using Latios. That's also something I wanted to add up.
Nice. All right. Anything else on the Lati Twins?
Yeah, I just want to add that as far as that, when you're team building and you're deciding between Latios and Latias, it usually comes down to how much. Well, it usually comes down to how much do you need that extra bulk to check Kyogre. Like for Saiyan teams that are already inherently weak to Kyogre, and especially Saiyan balanced teams, you usually want to opt for Latias just to help check that Specs Water Spout or Specs Surf a little bit better. And as far as why I believe Latios is used a lot more than Latias, I think it's simply because it's just more powerful as an offensive threat. And I also believe one of the main reason why it's so popular is because I think its versatility hasn't really been talked about enough. It can run Draco Meter, Dragon Pulse, Thunder, Side Shock, Grass Knot, Hidden Power, Fire. So it's really difficult if you're playing a Latios, it's really difficult to know exactly what his coverage moves are. And just in case, you could try to set up your Arceus on it with Spore Stance to Calm Mind, and then it has Roar, and then you just get phased out and you accomplish nothing. So when you add in its power and its versatility and its useful immunities, it's just one of the best Pokemon in the tier.
So those are the Lottie twins for us. So now we move on to our second Arceus form, Arceus Normal, who is, of course, famous for its Leftovers wall set. That's not true. It's really good. It's the only Arceus that can run Leftovers. And what's the first thing you do? You run Will-O-Wisp and Recover and a bunch of other walling stuff. So, yeah, what does Arceus Normal actually do? Besides, of course, there's also its famous Trick Choice Band set, which is just amazing. Also unique among Arceus forms. So what's that E-Killer I keep hearing about?
Well, Arceus is pretty much like you said. It does one thing: Spore Stance. Spore Stance, Extreme Speed, Shadow Claw, and the last move is usually Earthquake, but you can also run Recover, and it's basically just sweeps teams. That's basically what it does. I mean, I think everybody, or at least here, knows what E-Killer does. It doesn't. I don't think it needs much explanation, but.
Well, what are some of the variations on E-Killers? Like, besides Swords Dance and Extreme Speed, and then you have an Adamant Nature, of course, with Max Attack. So, what's its bulk like, its speed like? What item is it running? What coverage is it running?
Right, so, like, item-wise, it has, I guess, two options, really, in Black-White. And that's Lumberry and a Silk Scarf to get a stronger Extreme Speed. You could talk about Life Orb as well being in there, but it's very much niche in this tier because you don't want to take extra damage since you're already probably taking guaranteed hazard damage, right? So that's a big one. And spread wise, it's often the same with minor tweaks. It's often just bulky, and it turns out most E-Killers creep each other, so you don't really know who spread is the best. Some players bump it up to full even. So. But it depends really on the state of the metagame, how defining it is at the moment, how much you bump up the speed, I think. I like personally to outrun Timid Dialga, so I don't get surprised by a Choice Specs Timid Dialga or a Blim Dialga with Life Orb. But you know, the Life Orb stuff. So those are at least out of the way, and I don't think it compromises too much on the bulk, right? So it's not it's not that versatile of Pokemon really. It marginally changes what checks it, what you can use. You can run very niche stuff like Choppleberry to absorb Focus Blast, Terrakion in Close Combat, or Fighting Judgment. But yeah, it's like it doesn't really fundamentally change that much over time. It's you know what it does.
So then, in the last two move slots, then you have usually Shadow Claw and Earthquake or Brick Break?
I like Brick Break, but I'm probably the only one who likes Brick Break.
I always thought it was weird how E-Killer would just so readily run a set that was technically answered by Ferrothorn. I know +2 EQ and all, but it's not stab, and it can get uncomfortable.
It's exactly the reason I run Brick Break. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it also can run Overheat in
Sun. Yeah, that's actually super feasible.
To bypass Armory and Ferrothorn in Sun.
Yeah, it's actually, I think that set is super fun, and yeah.
Also, it can run Power Herb Shadow Force to bypass.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because and that's I guess a reason it's so popular, because if you don't run Power Herb and you think, yeah, I'm gonna get away with Shadow Force, because what can Giratina do? It can't switch out. Something else will eat the Shadow Force. But with Power Herb, you just bypass that. But sub can obviously it doesn't work against power herb, but it works against non-power herb. So that's I think why power herb was used in the first place to avoid subject.
Nice.
Yeah, what I really like about E-Killer in its place in the metagame is that is this brain dead go-to sweeper, but like it's very easy to set up a sweep, but it is also a Pokemon that has so many defensive as well as offensive answers that is not broken. Like it doesn't stand out as this. Oh, this Pokemon is better than everything else. Like certain Pokemon that would get in later gens, like Cernius. But like Arceus by itself, like it can be checked in any type of team reliably, while also it running like fun sets like hack set like and overheat, shadow force, stuff like that. You can even run sub SD with leftovers, so or SD recover. So it's a very I think it's the face in what Uber's Black and White Ubers is. It's like a really versatile Pokemon that you can do anything you want with it.
And yeah, I guess it's pretty simple when you really think about it. But on the other hand, then you can also do so many things with it, and that just makes it even better than it already is. I mean, like you said, it can be like really brainless to use, but as soon as you really put some thought behind it and don't just go, well, I'll click Swords Dance and then it might work out, then it becomes even better. All right, so right afterwards, then we have another Arceus form. This one, I believe, used for its ability to check both E-Killer and Darkrai post-Sleep Talk. It is Arceus Fighting. What does Arceus Fighting like to do?
Yeah, Arceus Fighting in general is a really good support Arceus. I'd say after Ghost, it's the most reliable in what it needs to do. It not only checks E-Killer and Darkrai reliably, but it also cripples a lot of Pokemon and hits just with raw fighting stab judgment, hits a lot of Pokemon really hard, like Dialga, for example. It's one of the few Pokemon that can actually revenge kill a Dialga without it being a ground type. It also has access to Ice Beam, so you can check Pokemon like Giratina Origin reliably, even if it's the Restock set. And it has access to Toxic, so you can, or Thunder Wave in some cases, so you can cripple Latias that switch into it.
I remember people used to use a Stone Edge fighting Arceus just to catch Ho-Oh.
Yeah, I think that set has fallen off a little bit, mostly because the metagame trends have changed a little bit. I think in the current metagame, it wants to run Ice Beam a little bit more, but like the variances that this Pokemon has are off the charts. And like the like all the purposes to using this Pokemon, I think it's one of the Pokemon that does it the most effectively in terms of support.
And at the same time, I think Stone Edge, you can't go wrong with using it even today, because Toxic and Judgment and Recover solves you so much. So, yeah, you don't become drastically worse by dedicating an entire move slot just for OO, which is insane. But you actually perform. It's like similar to Arceus Ghost in that regard, where Judgment, Wisp, and Recover does so much. Here, Judgment, Toxic, and Recover, does a lot here. So
it is also one of the few Arceus types that hits Ferrothorn with super effective Judgment. Yeah. So that is a big factor of why Arceus Fighting, just the support set, does as well as offensively as it does defensively, in my opinion.
Yeah, fighting Arceus is good in summation. So I'm glad that was simple. You guys want to say anything more about Arceus Fighting, or should we move on?
I guess the only thing I also have to add is that Arceus Fighting, I believe, is very unique in the metagame because it's probably the only Arceus form that can check a lot of threatening Pokemon such as Darkrai, Genesect, Delgia, Rayquaza, and especially Calm Mind Arceus Ghost, you could just switch into Toxicate. And also another in the most recent U pair, another underrated, I wouldn't say underrated, but very uncommon Arceus fighting set that has been used a little bit more is the Calm Mind set. It's a little bit risky to use because it's very handily beat by Mewtwo. But it's a really nasty surprise factor for a lot of offensive teams that don't expect you to have Calm Mind. And and lastly, Arceus Fight. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Arceus Fight is a very good support pairing with Pursuit Tyranitar, to where you can potentially pursue the Laddie twins, and that takes away a potential check. And really, and if you notice, once the Laddie is eliminated, a lot of teams are notoriously weak to Arceus Fight. So it's a very unique Arceus form in the metagame.
Yeah, I always liked about Arceus Fighting that it tended to threaten like at least 4, but usually 5 Pokemon on a sand team, because you usually had things like T-Tar, Pharaoh, Excadrill, Gliscor, and then like maybe you had an Arceus form that was okay against it, and one like kind of half check like a Lottie or especially defensive Giratina if we're talking about something like Donkey's old team, and it could be played around if you were good, but it was just one of the sand teams are really, really strong in Ubers, and Arceus Fighting is one of the most reliable ways to directly threaten them. Okay, so next up we have Darkrai, who is really straightforward. Dark Void, Dark Pulse, Focus Blast, Life Orb or Sash, depending on where you're using it on your team. And then in the last slot, then I feel like I don't see Nasty Plot as much anymore, and the 4th slot has become Thunder, simply because Specially Defensive Kyogre is so common, and with Thunder you really turn the tables on it. So is that still accurate, or has Darkrai changed a little bit?
I think regardless of what moves you put on Darkrai, it's pretty much going to be fundamentally the same Pokemon, right? So Dark Void is on all sets, and Dark Pulse. And then you have these variations. The Life Orb set was popular for a while with Thunder. I feel Substitute Nasty Plot has a lot of merit. Sash has seen a lot of play in recent years because it can use double status with Thunder Wave. So you sleep something like a Choice Band Ho, and then a Genesect tries to switch in, and you get them Thunder Wave. So you take out 2 for 1. So yeah, I mean, the only thing I want to say about Darkrai is that it's a little bit riskier to use in Black and White than it is in later gen, as funny as that sounds, because you die if you miss Dark Void in this gen. That's as simple as that. Whereas maybe in later gens you will try to Dark Void a support Arceus, which couldn't kill you, so you maybe got 2 chances. Stuff generally slowed down a little bit, and there wasn't the constant hazards. So you had more life to begin with, but in Black and White, I feel like you have that 8% chance, and if you don't hit, then it's over for the Darkrai. So it's a little bit riskier, actually, even though the sleep mechanics, which we can obviously debate for hours, are absurd. So yeah, that's I think all I want to say about Darkrai.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, sleep is... you covered everything. I'm not just going to repeat it. Okay, now we are finally moving on to the A rank, according to this, anyway. So these Pokemon are not as... I mean, no, they're still pretty essential through A, but after we'll kind of sweep through the rest. All right, so leading off A are Deoxys Speed and Deoxys Attack. And I'm going to ask that you guys maybe group them together because I see them used really similarly. I feel like I almost never see Life Orb DOA, but it's usually... They're both on these Hyper Offense Spikes teams, but Deoxys Speed sets up both Rocks and Spikes, and Deoxys Attack sets up Spikes and leaves Rocks to Groudon or Dialga or something. So what's the deal over there? Like, what moves are they running?
I would say DOS is extremely versatile. It can run Fire Punch to hit Genesect and Fortress. It can run Dark Pulse to hit opposing deals, Exatus, Espeons. I mean, it can also run, what else? Fire Punch, Dark Pulse, Extreme Speed. Well, Extreme Speed is really rare, but it can run that. It could also run a Trick Scarf set, the Surprise, Cloisters, and again opposing DOS. So it's I think it's pretty much similar to what it does in DPP. Not too much has changed. And as for Deoxys A, it's a more offensive form of Deoxys S. Is that you usually drop taunt and you're going to run spikes and 3 attacks: spike, cycle boost, extreme speed, and usually a filler move. I've even seen some people run icy wind. So its role is pretty much simple: lead, get up spikes. And lastly, as for Life Orb Deoxys A, I really don't see that too often in this tier, mainly because the threat of Shadow Sneak, Giratina O, and Extreme Speed E Killer usually forces you out, and forces you out very easily, and it's such a frail Pokemon that it doesn't see much usage.
I was gonna. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, also Scarf Genesect kind of made a DOA fall off a cliff in terms of Life Orb.
Right.
Because
is it not the same as but is in terms of facing Genesect, is DOA not basically the same as Mewtwo?
Well, Mewtwo can take a U-turn and recover off.
Mewtwo can take a U-turn?
Yeah, it takes like 59 to 70% from.
No. It takes a little bit more. It takes 75 around that from a neutral, but still, it takes it.
Yeah.
It has
very comfortably.
But the Ox attack sort of the logic with Life Orb is if you were to get a kill with the Ox's attack, then you would just have to switch out all the time because Genesect would come in and grab back the momentum. So it's hard to get something going with that mon.
Okay. So for the lead set, I want to say that I've seen some really funky stuff on DOS. Like I've seen Rocky Helmet isn't that weird because chip on spinning attempts and you break T-Tar Sash, which is amazing. But I've also seen Fling with King's Rock to get the advantage on other leads that try to sash and beat you on that turn. What's the deal there?
I have a 6-hour conversation log that you can read with me and Kebabe when we built with that set for problems last year, but it's yeah. I mean,
I can't believe
King's
I forgot
Rock
about that set.
Yeah, King's Rock is like, it's very niche though. I mean, you would think it's absolutely amazing, but it can't really do all the things at once. It has troubles with opposing Deoxys speed because you have to sort of rely on the speed tie with taunt for others. And I don't even think the KO on like Frostlass with King's Rock plus Fire Punch is guaranteed. But still, it has that insane niche versus like where you could get Sash Tyranitar Sash broken, or obviously versus Deoxys attack, which is the main draw to it. And you can obviously not run Spikes and Stealth Rock on that set, so but it's a very fun set. I'll give
also,
that.
I don't know if they mentioned. Honestly, I missed out. Red card on DOS is also a good thing because a lot of spinners want to lead off against it. So you can run like red card with HP Fire mainly to threaten forward threats. So they rapid spin on the first turn as you keep spiking and the sash is broken. So you HP Fire them afterwards and you guarantee your spikes. So I think in that regard, I think DOS is still the most versatile lead in my opinion.
Cool, but at their core, then both of these guys are pretty simple, and it's in the details that the fun stuff really comes out. And they're leading off hyper offense, and hyper offense is really, really good. Okay, Ho-Oh is really, really unique. It's got a great defensive profile. I don't know how common physically defensive is anymore. I remember it was popular for a time because it could kind of check things like E-Killer and Psystrike Mewtwo and Blaziken. I don't know how common that is, but I remember then people started running not just Life Orb, but a Choice Band a lot, because with Sleep Talk you could offensively absorb Darkrai. That's another reason Thunder became popular, and it was just a great Choice Bander in general because of Regenerator. So what's Ho-Oh doing these days?
It's becoming more and more extreme, I feel like, throughout the years. So it started as a sort of, you try to check things by using its bulk, leveraging the EVs, leftovers maybe, and then it gradually developed into Life Orb, at least to do a lot of damage, but it still ran a lot of bulk and roost. And then it started running Choice Band, but still with bulk, and you would try to leverage out. And nowadays, all I see or use is just straight up max speed Jolly Choice Band to get the jump on everything you can possibly get the jump on. At least have the chance versus other timid or jolly base 90s, and those are common. So I feel like Ho has become an extreme but a niche pick, but still when it still performs extremely well. But I think it's not used to its defensive purposes anymore. It's just all out offense.
I gotta say, I hadn't heard of it running Jolly. That's news to me.
Yeah, because you just gain all the opportunities to you face off against an adamant Groudon, and you suddenly get to jump on that. Maybe a modest Specs Kyogre, and you suddenly OHKO that if they don't run any bulk. So you get like so many more opportunities to just get that one hit in. And Ho, compared to later gens, it gets 2-3 hits max in per game nowadays. So you have to make those hits count, and you have to maximize the opportunity to get those hits in. So that's the logic, I think, behind being fast.
All right. And the Stealth Rock issue is really something because, like we said early on, then spinning in this tier is really hard. And it can be done, but it's really hard. And, well, I guess we'll get to the Magic Sun later on, but Stealth Rock, I like that it's helped out a little bit by Regenerator, even if you don't manage to get rocks off. And it's very difficult to prevent it from KOing something. So at the very least, then it feels like with all the steel types in the tier, then and the ease with which you can switch it in under Sun, and how difficult it is to switch in Kyogre to remove the Sun, then it's easy to get something KO'd with Ho-Oh before rocks start to catch up with it. And of course, if you can if you can keep rocks off, then it's just monstrous. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, I do want.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, all I was going to say was that the defensive Ho-Oh set is kind of falling off a bit because, as you said, keeping off rocks is extremely difficult. So with rocks up, you can't actually check the things that you're supposed to check, and you just end up dying. So people are just opting just to go fully offensive and to maximize Ho-Oh's damage output, and that's pretty much what it's mainly doing nowadays. And also, Ho-Oh, it's an extremely big threat to slower teams, balance teams, and occasional stall teams too. Because with its Choice Band set, it's just extremely difficult and almost impossible to switch into safely. Especially if you don't get Stealth Rock up, it's just going to keep repeatedly switching in on something passive and hitting you with Brave Birds and Sacred Fires, and it's just devastating. It's just a devastating Pokemon, and it's one of the main reasons why. If anytime you're playing and you see a Ho-Oh on the opposing team, you want to get Stealth Rock up as fast as possible, because if you don't, Ho-Oh is going to almost certainly do a lot of damage to your team.
All right. Yeah. Anything else, Edgar?
Just wanted to say that Ho-Oh in general is really threatening. One of its flaws, or I think in the current metagame, it's a little bit more matchup reliant, because a lot of the Stealth Rock users that are being used have a way of getting rocks up even on Magic Sun. So that's something, I guess, that one flaw that Ho has is that Stealth Rocks are very possible, but overall is a really reliable Pokemon offensively.
I think it became this way because people started really preparing for it. For a while there, it just flew under the radar. And it just, people weren't prepared enough. But now you have Arceus Ghost being a go-to Stealth Rocker, so good luck with keeping Stealth Rocks off, right? So
cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, so next up we have Ferrothorn, who is not a perfect Kyogre answer, but it is still a good one, and it handles the Lottie Twins as a stab, and I mean, Draco resist in general is amazing, and it spikes and leech seeds all over the place. So why is it down here with these other guys who are noticeably a step below? Is it because it doesn't play at the fast pace of the more offensive spikers and the aggressive, more versatile Pokemon in the tier?
Well, I think it's because it's a very good support Pokemon, but it's used on a very like a very unique, not unique, but a very centric play style, which is balance or just defensively oriented teams. And nowadays, these are just harder to find. So I think Ferrothorn is a really good support Pokemon. It resists Draco Meteor, which is really huge. But overall, there's the main thing is that it doesn't feed on offense very often, so you need to run very specific stuff with it too.
So, is there? Oh, all right. I guess does it run knockoff as much as it does in OU? Because I notice in a lot of games where Ferrothorns face off, then they just kind of fight each other, and then no one wants to switch into a Leech Seed, so they just stay in with all 3 layers of spikes up and not willing to budge. And knockoff seems like it has a lot of utility in general, or is the pace of Ubers too fast for that to really be of much use?
I'm a big fan of knockoff, but I think it diminishes also even your checking potential against something like Scarf Kyogre, so you have to be very careful at build then. But usually this is not that much of a problem because you use it with stuff like Tentacruel, maybe a Latias, a special defense Kyogre, stuff like that. But you have to be careful when using knockoff and not having the Leech Protect combo. I think it's a signum of Ubers to have the Leech Seed Protect more often than not. But I think it's very possible to go without it as well. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Also, using Ferrothorn usually it's harder to feed a spinner if you're using Ferrothorn because it's a steel type and most spinners are steel types. But I think overall, Ferrothorn is really good in the teams that it used in. Like it does a lot of things for things. Even on sand, it's really good. Not only
Yeah, I would say like Ferrothorn is enabling at least certain playstyles to actually exist. I mean, if Ferrothorn didn't exist, we couldn't have the bulky rain teams. I think to a certain extent. So it's actually very essential to those teams. But outside those teams, yeah, it's not that viable.
All right.
All right. I mean, Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn it's definitely one of the best defensive Pokemon in the tier. And if you're not careful, it's very easy to build a Uber team, a Black White Uber team that's extremely Ferrothorn weak. Like if your Delgia doesn't carry Fire Blast, and you have a few passive Pokemon, and if you find yourself playing against a Ferrothorn, all of a sudden you feel like you can't touch it, and it's just leech seeding and getting up spikes, and it's just very difficult to face off if you're not careful about preparing for it. And Ferrothorn is actually an issue that a lot of people who get into Black White Ubers have troubles beating, especially when it's paired up with Kyogre, because it's such a bulky defensive Pokemon, and it's very difficult to break if you don't know what you're doing. That it's just a menace.
Yeah, the reason that I get this asked a lot when I build a team with Dialga on Rain, I always run Fire Blast because even on Rain, Fire Blast is a 2-hit KO on Ferrothorn, and I think that's huge for any support Pokemon because you don't want to lose momentum to Ferrothorn on balance for any reason possible. So that's it. Just tells you how much impact it actually has.
Okay, that's Ferrothorn for you. All right, we already went over Latias, which is great, and now we have Palkia, and we kind of covered Palkia alongside Dialga, but I just mentioned that it's kind of like a Lati twin in terms of checking Kyogre offensively, but with obviously it doesn't have the longevity, it doesn't have a healing move, and it is hit by spikes. But what is really cool about Palkia is that it is possibly the most impossible Pokemon to switch into in the entire tier, because whether it's Rain or Sun, you know, in Rain, then it gets this is something it has over Dialga, and it has a boost to its Water Stab in Rain, and of course 100% accurate Thunder, like Dialga. And then in Sun, it has that boosted Fire Blast, so it's nearly impossible to check. I mean, you can't even try to just use an Arceus form for it. Like the closest you can come is something like a Ghost Arceus in Sun, because the Fire Blast can be shrugged off. But like a Ghost Arceus switching into Palkia in Rain doesn't work, because Hydro Pump's just going to blow it away, especially if it runs Lustrous Orb, as it often does. Sometimes it likes Habenberry, but I think that's declined, and Lustrous Orb's power is just insane, because it also boosts your Spatial Rend. And another thing that destroys Arceus regardless of weather, and this is both in terms of just being able to switch into it or Calm Mind Arceus trying to use it as setup fodder, is a Dragon Tail, which is really popular on, and it even gets a little boost thanks to Lustrous Orb. But that one's really nasty. So with the set of Spatial Rend, Hydro, Fire Blast, and Dragon Tail, I mean, you can mix in Thunder. Some people like Sleep Talk because it's not the worst check in the world to Darkrai. And it's just a really, really vicious Pokemon. And of course, it's held back by... And it's got great speed, too, because so much of Ubers is dominated by that base 90 area. And Palkia gets not just a jump on them, but a jump on the stuff that's slightly faster than it, like the 95s in Rayquaza and Kyurem White. And you can just get so much offensive mileage out of Palkia. And has great defensive utility. And of course, it's vulnerable to counterattacks more so than Dialga, but it's just a nasty, nasty Pokemon. So what else is there with Palkia that I did not just say?
I think something that, well, you mentioned pretty much everything. Like Palkia, I think it's easier to check Palkia in Sun than it is on Rain. The only good reliable Palkia 100% I'd say check in Rain is Arceus Grass. But even that can get to hit KO by Spec. But
and a Dragon Tail with spikes down makes it really uncomfortable switching into Spatial Rend after.
Yeah, but you were really on point on what Palkia does. Basically, it is a really it fell off a little bit from the market. Checking Kyogre because of Latias. It's more like Latias in general are more reliable. But if you're looking like for a wall breaker, you can always run Lustrous or even Specs Palkia and to hit KO everything with Hydro Pump. So it's a really strong wall breaker, and one of the harder Pokemon to check in the tier.
It's actually, I feel like it's gotten to the point where it's a little bit underrated, Palkia, which I thought I'd never say. Because it has a clear entrance point into games, because it's 4 times resistant to water, so it gets in on the Kyogre, so it will get in, and then you have all the moves in the world to pick from to actually do damage. So at least theoretically, it's very underrated, but it falls into the category of all dragons which are slower than Latias and Latios, which is exactly that it just it becomes hard for it because of the speed tier, I feel. So, and Habanberry, obviously, it doesn't really help that much. It helps with Latias, but Latios actually OHKOs Palkia through Habanberry, so, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to add about Palkia is that it also can run a status move, Thunder Wave, as Edgar knows very well, or Toxic, the surprise Arceus forms. And as for Habanberry, I do find it useful on offensive teams, because a lot of the times the Latios will come in and click Draco meter, and you can surprise them and live their attack with the Habanberry.
Well, you can't actually live the Latios attack with Habanberry. No. After Stealth Rock, you're guaranteed that, and even with Stealth Rock, it's like 25% chance. But sure, with Latios. So even the only way I made Habanberry work was to actually use Trick Room Palkia with it. So you could Trick Room with the extra HP investment. But yeah, I mean, versus Latias you live, so that's always something.
Yeah, and I guess other random dragon moves. So
yeah, like Dragon Pulse from support Dialga, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's Palkia for us. Great poke, but like as we move down the viability list, then it's not like a huge divide, but you start to see the trade-offs become a little bit more significant between something like a Ho-Oh and Ferrothorn and Palkia, as opposed to the Groudons and the Dialgas of the tier. So our final poke in this Viability Rankings A rank is Rayquaza. And Rayquaza at first glance might seem like just another strong dragon in a tier already littered with dragons. But for me, and I'm sure most others, the really cool thing about Rayquaza is that it means you don't have to run your own weather to not lose to weather sweepers. So like how rain teams are sometimes really vulnerable to opposing rain teams with Kabutops, and or if they just lose the weather war and they're facing down an Excadrill, Rayquaza fits on pretty much any kind of offense team, and with Airlock, then you nullify that Sand Rush or that Swift Swim, and you just destroy things. So and it's got a great speed tier. It outruns all the 90s. So Groudon, Kyogre, Dialga, and it's of course just and it's as strong as them too. So its Draco Meteors are vicious, and it can follow up on bulky Arceus forms or like weakened Lottie twins with extreme speed. So the thing about Rayquaza is that it's really hard to switch into anything because it doesn't have bad bulk, but it doesn't have great resists, and it's Stealth Rock weak. So yeah, it's really vicious on offense, especially on those teams that don't really switch a lot. So all right, what else is there with Rayquaza?
I think extreme speed is pretty huge for Rayquaza because if you are running an offensive team and you don't want to run Giratina, you can run Dragon Claw and extreme speed to bypass
Deoxys speed, yeah,
stuff like that. And something I've been seeing recently is that since Sword Dance is sometimes really hard to pull off, you can just run Dragon Tail on Rayquaza and with hazards up, and some of the common switchings to Rayquaza are Arceus forms. You can Dragon Tail them out, and now they are in big rate range after Stealth Rocks and Spikes. So and Dragon Tail. So that Pokemon, I'd say it's a bit better than it was a few years back. I found a lot of more uses to it than it had before, but yeah, it's a kind of a hard Pokemon to use with Genesect and in general like a faster tier.
But one can't stress how much it actually means to outspeed Swift Swimmers for certain teams. I think that's a niche that can't be replicated.
Yeah, actually, like outspeeding Kingdra and Excadrill would be huge.
Yeah. All right. So now we're down to the A- pokes. So, and after that, we're just kind of going to leave the rest as kind of the extras, because this has already gone on long enough, which is good, but I don't think we want to be going through everything from, Gliscor to, Arceus Electric and Zekrom, and it's mostly self-explanatory from there, unless you guys really want to talk about Tornadus Therian, Arceus Dragon, and Probopass. But yeah, so in A rank,
is Probopass ranked?
It is. It's Probopass.
It was a joke team.
Probopass is ranked above Hippowdon, which it's ranked above Kyurem White, which it just seems wrong. But we'll get to that.
No, I think I can live with it being ranked above Hippowdon actually for sure.
But Kyurem White, really? I mean, I know hazards are a big deal, but come on. Okay, so speaking of Steel types, their first Pokemon in A- is Arceus Steel, which, I'll be honest, I did not expect it to be ranked this high, because I thought things like Tentacruel, Fortress, Arceus Grass would be more prominent, or Arceus Rock, which in Sand is just a monster, or pretty much everything else in B+ rank. Because, I mean, Steel is great typing, immune to Sand, resistant to Stealth Rock, immune to Toxic, all that stuff, but resistant to Dragon, obviously. So what sets exactly does Arceus Steel use that make it A- rank?
Well, I'm surprised it is ranked this high, to be honest. Arceus Steel is pretty good in terms of a support Pokemon, and also like being a support Pokemon as well as a sweeper. Because if you run Calma and Will-O-Wisp, for example, you can Will-O-Wisp Extreme Killer Arceus and have a nice day. Or you can throw CM Thunder, which is more common now because of SPDF Kyogre. The main thing it has for it is pretty obvious. It switches into Draco Meteors, but outside of that, I don't think like offensively it's not that reliable because Steel is not a very reliable attacking type in Black and White Ubers, in my opinion. But as a support, like I guess you can get a little bit of both worlds with it in terms of you can switch it into Draco Meteors and also attempt to sweep. But he has a lot of easy ways to bypass this type, in my opinion.
Yeah. Anything else? Because it feels like it definitely feels more niche than the other pokes in A minus who are more defined. But we'll get to them momentarily.
Yeah, it's definitely niche. I would say I like this most primary set is the Calm Mind set with Calm Mind, obviously Recover and Judgment. And the last slot pretty much varies. Most people run Roar, the wins Calm Mind Wars, or Whips, the burn of Groudon or Sword Stance Arceus, or even Substitute. And Thunder has actually been picking up lately since a common scenario that typically happens that a Koga is going to usually walls Arceus still, and more people are just running Thunder just to get right past it. And Arceus still, even though its typing can be beneficial sometimes, can be beneficial for certain offensive teams for switching into Draco Meteor, the ground and fight weakness really harms it a lot. And steel typing is okay, but isn't the best. So while it definitely has its advantages, I do agree with Edgar that it's more of a niche Arceus form.
Good. All right. Should we move on to the other A minus pokes who I think are more defined?
Well, I think Excadrill has a lot of uses. Not only is a Silent Sweeper, but if using on rain balance, it has Mold Breaker, Stealth Rock, which is really huge when Magic Sun is a thing. And it also has a good typing and good bulk to be like a defensive pivot to toxic Arceus forms, Latias, also taking some Draco Meteors and stuff like that. So I think overall it's a really it's a good Pokemon, I'd say, support Pokemon. And offensively, well, in Sand, if your Giratina or Flying immunity is gone, you're going to be in a world of hurt. It's really hard to check.
Mm-hmm. And what I like about Excadrill in this tier is that it's not beholden to just being run on Sand alongside T-Tar. Just like T-Tar doesn't necessarily need to run Excadrill. So, and Excadrill is really unique because, like you said, the Mold Breaker rocks, and being able to spin on Dialga and that Dragon Electric combination is just so good. It's like if someone took Steelix's amazing typing and gave it to a much, much, much better Pokemon. Okay, so anything else on Excadrill?
Also,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I do want to add about Excadrill is that it's a very interesting Pokemon. This is one of the few rapid spinners, assuming that you pair it up with Tyranitar or Hippowdon with for the double speed for Sand Rush that can actually get past the spin blockers and Ubers, because obviously after a Sword Stance you do a ton of damage to Giratina O and Arceus Ghost, and it can even run gems like Ghost Gem with Shadow Claw, and after a Sword Stance I haven't ran the calcs, but I'm pretty sure you KO both Giratina O and Arceus Ghost, and then you can easily get a spin off later in the game. So it's definitely I definitely agree. I definitely agree that it's one of the unique spinners in the tier because of its offensive powers.
Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily just need to even spin, because it could just win the game instead. All right, then there's T-Tar, and T-Tar generally I find like you can go either the Pursuit defensive set with it on like dedicated Sand teams, but there are also a lot of offensive teams that really like Sash-Tar, although I don't know how popular that set still is with the proliferation of these anti-T-Tar Deoxys speed leads. So what's the deal with T-Tar?
Yeah, Tyranitar. Oh yeah, you can go, Edgar. Yeah.
Well, Tyranitar, I think it's still very reliable as a lead, but I'd say it has fallen off the market a little bit, like you said, with these lead Deoxys. But on Sand is a really reliable Pokemon, because if you run enough bulk, you can switch it into a lot of stuff, mainly Draco Meteor. The fact that it switches into Draco Meteor from Dialga is such a big deal, because it takes it basically walls it, or if it doesn't have Aura Sphere, and even then you can take some hits with Chople Berry and wear it down with Low Kick. And it also has access to Fire Blast, so Firethorn isn't exactly a switch in. And it can also, we talked about this before, how it can pursue Trap Laddies. So that's a lot of what it has going for it. And I'd say for a tier where its two main weather setters are base, like these really strong, powerful Pokemon, Tyranitar definitely holds its weight against them.
Nice. Okay, and then we have the rain counterpart of Excadrill in Kabutops. And Kabutops is, I guess it's a fairly simple Pokemon. It's like Excadrill, except it has the really notable benefit of having its main stab move boosted by its weather. And that lets it break through things like neutral Arceus forms really nicely. Is there anything you guys want to say about Kabutops?
Kabutops, I think it's fairly simple. Can I, or, yeah.
Well, yeah. You want to go, or you want, or
yeah, I'll go. But I feel like in DPP, if you want to compare, Kabutops doesn't really have that much of a defensive niche. But in Black and White, it actually gained a lot of targets compared to. It's very strong versus Arceus normal. It's pretty good versus Arceus Ghost. Arceus Steel good versus that. Ferrothorn good versus that. So it's just a cleaner for rain teams. It's the last thing you send out.
Nice.
Kabutops, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, it's you pretty much. I find that it's limited because you pretty much always have to pair it up with Koga, otherwise it's useless. And this most common set is the Life Orb set with Waterfall, Low Kick, Stone Age, and Rapid Spin. And while it can really be only used as a cleaner, since even with Life Orb and the admin nature, it really lacks the power to get the guaranteed KO on many of the bulkier Pokemon in the tier. So you usually have to save it late game as a cleaner. And even if you want to spin, it's a 50-50 between whether they're going to switch into their Ghost or not, if it's Giratina Ode. And even if you get the prediction right, you still have to hit the stone edges, assuming you go for it. And the matchup versus Arceus Ghost is a little bit better since you can Waterfall, but it's still, as far as spinning, it's still a little tricky. And it needs a lot of support to really work. And of course, you always need rained up. So while it's a good Pokemon, it's a little bit limited in the builder.
All right, that's fair enough. Okay, so if you guys don't want to add anything else, then we will just B+ and above are like important parts of the metagame, but they're more straightforward, and there's a lot of them. As much as I may love Arceus Ground and Landorus and even the occasional Blaziken, but we're going to switch gears now, and we're going to go to some sample teams that these guys have put together for us for the purpose of exhibiting and illustrating the most prominent playstyles in the metagame more clearly. So instead of just saying, oh, well, this Pokemon goes well with this, now you see some close-up examples. So these are all some metagame standards that have seen a lot of tournament usage and success, and we are going to start with this Darkrai Magic Sun. So, which one of you guys wants to talk about this team?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I'm gonna pull up it on my screen as well, so I can see. Okay, yeah. Oh. So basically, this is the example of how you can try to keep hazard off with Ho. And the one thing that sticks out for everyone who's not played the tier is obviously what is Espeon doing there. And Espeon guarantees you the condition that Stealth Rock will be off that turn you switch it in. Yes, it doesn't do this permanently, but for one turn it will guarantee the condition. So you will use it as a sort of suicide attempt to prevent Stealth Rock as much as you can during the early game, so that you can then re-grab momentum with it, with Ho-Oh and other mons to deal as much damage as you can before Stealth Rocks go up, and then you try to clean with the Arceus normal. And set-wise, Espeon's set is geared towards hitting as many of the Stealth Rockers as hard as you can. So Grass Knot for Groudon, Hidden Power Fighting, which seems a little bit odd, but you get that 40% on Dialga, and suddenly it's in range for a lot of things. And then obviously Shadow Ball for Deoxys speed, and Psyshock in general, just to have the damage. Also for Tentacruel, because it's not always the case that you even only try to prevent Stealth Rocks. You try to prevent as many hazards as possible. And this is due to Espeon's Sash having to be attacked. And obviously the team also has a Darkrai, which is also sashed. So there's some synergy there. So you usually try to prevent hazards as much as you can early game. And Darkrai functions kind of like a fake lead. So you try to do status things to support Ho with the speed drops of Thunder Wave, and you can even use it to taunt Stealth Rockers if your Espeon is fainted. So you have a lot of options to just try to push the envelope as much as you can for your opponent to not have Stealth Rocks up, so you can deal as much damage as you can with Ho. And you also notice that this team does not have a Kyogre check, so it relies on switching in the special defensive Groudon into Kyogre and then resetting the weather to keep pushing. So it's actually a very offensive team. And then the best synergy for Ho is usually a good physical cleaner, and that's Arceus Normal here. And this team, one should also be clear that Arceus Normal hates entry hazards as much as anything, because it can now leverage a lot of its bulk. So if you prevent hazards for it, then you will have an easier time setting up, maybe even 2 sword stances to sweep. So yeah, I think this is an example of you have to sort of be in a mindset of very high aggression to play with this team, and sacrifice a lot just to get those hits in with Ho, just to make sure that Stealth Rock is not up. And not to say there isn't an element of prediction in this. Obviously, Espeon, you can put it as 50-50s, but strategically it's not always the 50-50s, because there is a guarantee in the condition when you switch in Espeon, that's that when you switch in Espeon, the Stealth Rock won't be up. So it may look like 50-50s a lot of the time, but sometimes you may as well switch in Espeon regardless. So it's often also about identifying the situations where you need to pull a straight 50-50 and not where you just need to guarantee the condition.
I think
So
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I had on this team.
I think that's a good lesson for Pokemon in general. A lot of people will see things as 50-50s just because if A, then B, if B, then C, and so on. But it's being able to force a certain situation no matter what the opponent does, and then having to capitalize on it like that gives those kinds of turns more weight. And I think they need to be considered as opposed to just, oh, I'll flip a coin. So
it's a question of strategy versus tactic.
Exactly.
So you have a overarching strategy with this team, and then you can obviously change the tactics at certain point. But overall, you have certain conditions you want fulfilled to win the game. So you have to take that into account when you're making plays.
All right, great. So now we have Arceus fighting Sand. Who would like to take this team?
I can talk about it. This is basically how Sand teams in general work. You have your Tyranitar, you have your Excadrill, and Latias. We mentioned earlier that Latias is very prominent on Sand because it's the most reliable Kyogre switching for defensive or bulkier teams. And you have a second Kyogre answer in the form of Ferrothorn for later in the game. Ferrothorn also offers spike support and DC support, so it can make the game a lot easier for Excadrill, because with hazards up, the switchings for Excadrill are also very debatable. And with Sand up, even Giratina Origin doesn't appreciate switching into Excadrill, because since it doesn't have leftovers recovery, it's not an infinite switching, so it gets worn down really easily. On this team, I have Restock Giratina Origin with double facing moves. because checking ground types in general is easier with reliable Giratina Origin set, and also absorbing status is also more reliable. And with Sand Up, you also want to recover HP as better as possible, and that alongside Ferrothorn's Leash Seed gives Giratina Origin like the edge over a lot of Pokemon or a lot of matchups. Better said. And lastly, we have Arceus Fighting. With the help with Ferrothorn, it checks in offense, and it switches into Genesect. And if they go to a Lati Twin, you can just switch into Tyranitar and Pursuit Trap them. So that's another ground immunity gone. So it's a very straightforward team. There's a lot of versions of it, but I think this is the more consistent one. And yeah, the Latias also has Roar and Psyshock to maximize offensive output. So it's overall one of the most consistent teams.
It is really good. It's got a great core, and it has a lot of offense, especially because spikes make it really easy to win the weather war against rain and sun, and then Excadrill really goes wild. And I also wanted to mention the importance of Latias here, not just for Kyogre, but for Arceus Fighting, which, as we mentioned earlier, is one of the most threatening pokes to sand teams. And Latias is one of the best Pokemon against Calm Mind Arceus Fighting, because you have Psyshock to bypass any Calm Mind boosts, and you take even Ice Beams and boosted Ice Beams pretty well. So, all right, next up we have Frostlass Rain. Who would like to go over that one?
That's mine too. Well, that's my... I posted it. So yeah, this team is also very straightforward. It's basically your vanilla version of Rain offense. I'm using Frostlass because it has a really good matchup against Deoxys Leads in the form that it can Icy Wind and then Shadow Ball. Even if they try to taunt you, you usually want to Icy Wind first, and then OHKO them with or KO them with Shadow Ball afterwards. And it sets up spikes. It's a spin blocker and a spiker at the same time, and also has access to taunt. So it can, given the appropriate lead, it can taunt them as well. I have SPDF Kyogre to switch into Darkrai because that is something that Frostlass doesn't appreciate, being slower and weak to Dark, and being able to be flinched by Dark Pulse. So you want Kyogre that gets switched into, or another Pokemon that gets switched into Darkrai. So I have SPDF for that purpose, and then I have Life Orb Dialga with Stealth Rock, with Draco Meteor, Fire Blast, and Thunder, just to get some offensive momentum going on and some really strong hits going on. We're done Pokemon for the late game on Kabutops, and then I have Giratina Origin with Earthquake, Dragon Tail, Shadow Sneak, and Magic Coat. I have Magic Coat in case I face Fortress Leads or Cloister Leads or stuff like that. But that set could also be changed to Will-O-Wisp or Substitute if you feel like it. But yeah, and also Genesect for offensive momentum, and Giratina Origin paired with Genesect, a really good offensive core in this type of teams. You might be a little bit weirded out by not having an Arceus on this team, which is not a common thing, but this team as it is works really well. Also, Giratina Origin is a really good ground immunity. It's a good example of how having a ground immunity in offense helps you with stuff with Kabutops and Excadrill in general, and Rock Polish Groudon. So it's a very reliable Pokemon. And last but not least, Kabutops. Very straightforward. You have the Waterfall, Stone Edge, Low Kick, Rapid Spin, Sataki moves, and with the Life Orb, it's a really good cleaner in general with Spikes and Stealth Rock up. So yeah, that's basically the team.
Solid one. I like that you have Genesect and Kabutops. That's a little trivia thing for the nerds out there. All right, next up we have Standard Deoxys Speed Hyper Offense. And who would like to go over this one? If you guys would like, then I can, because it's fairly simple. So I'll do that. So Deoxys speed here is standard with Rock, Spikes, Taunt, and then Fire Punch, just so Fortress can't set up in your face. Custat Berry Fortress became really popular for a while because it would get the spike off and then it would bypass its low speed and get off a last spin or a boom or something. And being able to prevent that from going crazy on you is really important. And also, Fire Punch allows you to destroy Genesect that leads off if that happens because DOS is so fast that it outruns even Scarfers. And then the rest of it is just a fairly simple offensive core with some of the best Pokemon in the tier. Again, you got Giratina Origin with, this time Sub, but it's got Dragon Tail, it's got Sneak. You have the Habenberry Dragon Tail Palkia, as we mentioned earlier. This is the Kyogre check, and also unwallable, pretty much. Sun or Rain, and Dragon Tail to split the difference if they do happen to have that one check, as well as prevent a Calm Mind. Preventing Calm Mind Arceus sweeps is really important because they're so bulky and so fast that they can quickly get out of hand. So you want to have things like Dragon Tail alongside Hazards, and Darkrai's Dark Void also goes a really big, long way with this. You have another Sash Darkrai here, which is really big with the Taunt Deoxys preventing a lot of hazards. You have the Life Orb Recover Extreme Killer here, a jolly one at that. So that's unique, but at its core it's still Extreme Killer. And then you have Groudon providing Sun, so you're not getting swept by Excadrills and Kabutops. Like Edgar said, you have Giratina Origin for Excadrill, but it's still a good Pokemon to have just for the weather advantage, and of course it's a great sweeper in its own right with Double Dance and Lum, so a random Wisp Arceus isn't going to slow your sweep down. That's big. Alright, and then we have one more team, and that is a Rain Balance, which is a really popular style. Who would like to go over Kyogre, Dialga, Pharaoh, Tenna, Arceus Ghost, Gliscor, or the most typical Rain Balance team imaginable?
Yeah, this is a team I posted. Like you say, it's just a typical Rain Balance. So I have a specially defensive Kyogre here, which is its primary duty. It's to obviously check Darkrai, and it also checks other passive Pokemon such as support Delgia. It can kind of soft check Palkia in the emergency, Tyrannosaurus, and the primary thing with this Kyogre is that you want to get up hazards up as soon as possible and just start just being a nuisance and clicking Roar and wearing down the opposing team. Next up is Delgia. It's primarily a bulky offensive mind. I have it here to check obviously Kyogre, Ho-Ho, Palkia, and it obviously is very reliable at setting up rocks. And it has a different role than Kyogre, but it does a similar type function. The goal here is to set up Stealth Rock and click Roar and wear down the opposing team basically. Next up is Ferrothorn. My special wall is mainly there to check Kyogre, Kingdra, various Arceus forms, and to set up spikes. Let's see. Next up is Technicrew, my rapid spinner, because this team really needs a spinner. Otherwise, hazards are going to get up rather quickly. I have a very standard Technicrew set with Protect, Scale, Rapid Spin, and Toxic Spikes. And Toxic Spikes is here to obviously wear down the opposing team over the course of the match. Next up after Technicrew is Arceus Ghost, which is very key for my team because if you notice, I'm very weak to Rayquaza, Groudon, and various physical sweepers, Mewtwo, because my Kyogre is in Choice Scarf, so I don't have a speed control or revenge killer. So Arceus Ghost is extremely important for this team. You really don't want to let it get status at all throughout the match, if possible, because you need it relatively healthy to check, like I said, Mewtwo, Rayquaza, Groudon, and obviously it's the team spin blocker, so it's very key here. And lastly, the round out the team is Gliscor with Taunt, Substitute, Toxic, Earthquake. Because if you notice, my first 5 Pokemon on my team are very passive, and I felt like I needed a way to break opposing balance and stall teams, and Gliscor does that extremely well. It's also one of the best Groudon counters in the tier, especially for the Lumberry variant. Although the Lumberry could get past Gliscor if it hits Stone Edge or if it had or with a +2 Fire Punch, but otherwise it's relatively reliable at that. But Gliscor's main function on the team is to break opposing stall and balance teams, and that's it with the team. It's a pretty standard, 4/4/technical balance team.
I remember Pieface used to use a lot of these kinds of teams, and even though everyone knew they were coming, they just wouldn't lose because these teams are really solid. And what I like about this variant you have is the double roar here, because most people would say, I think, oh, I don't really need roar on Dialga, but this just perfectly shows how strong hazards are in this tier. That having 2 phasers is not weird, but once you get into a game and notice that you have this possible weapon of these 2 phasers, then you notice how quickly you're going to soften up the opposing team, and Arceus Ghost is just going to take over. And of course, there's a Gliscor on this team, and Gliscor is absolutely amazing because nothing bulky is going to want to. Bulky teams just hate it more than anything else, and it's even good against offense because, like you said, perfect against Groudon. It's great at helping you win Weather Wars because it switches into Groudon and T-Tar, and it puts so much pressure on the other team because no Arceus form is going to take a Toxic, except for Steel, and Steel, of course, gets weakened by Stab Earthquake. And the spin on Tentacruel here is really big because, like you said, you need Arceus healthy, and you have this synergy to keep it as healthy as possible. And I just wanted to ask, what are you using Gyro Ball on Pharaoh for?
It's primarily to hit Latios and Latios.
Yeah, of course. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so those are our sample teams. And now we are going to wrap up by looking at a couple games really, really quick because I've already kept these guys here way too long. So our first game is March Fires versus Hack. So Hack, whenever you want, you can start talking about this one.
Yeah, for sure. Are you going to share your screen or something so we can see everything?
Good point. I should do that.
So it's probably easier for you since you're recording.
Oh, wait. And... okay, there you go. Now you should be able to see it.
Great. Okay. Let's see. Watch. I press watch stream and I'm feeling like boomer.
We are old. We're talking about an Uber's metagame that's older than most of the modern player base. So
yeah, we're too old for this. But yeah, as we see the team sample I sent you, and March Fires using a hyper offensive team with Frostlass as the lead. Frostlass gives you an additional spin blocker, as Edgar said, also a good matchup versus Deoxys forms. So looking at team preview, you notice that I have a Sash Darkrai from the sample before, and there is absolutely no drawback to leading it. So I don't tend to think that much. And obviously in Ubers it's also easy to understand which Darcy it is, and it can really only be Ghost or maybe Normal on his team. Ghost because spin blocking is still necessary if you have Frostlass most of the time, but you could maybe get away with Arceus Normal on this team because you're so offensive that you might not allow a spin. So Darkrai leads for Genesect, and we see instantly why you shouldn't give Genesect a plus attack with your EVs, because as you see it does 85%, so if Stealth Rock was up and I used a normal, didn't have a Sash, I would have lived that. So it comes in handy in many situations, and I just void. And March Fire sacks the Frostlass because it's useless in this matchup, and goes Genesect, and I reveal Thunder Wave. And this is what I talked about going through the team. So now I already supported Ho by sleeping one thing and paralyzing one thing that's faster. And here is the guarantee of condition versus Espeon with Espeon. And this allows me to know that I don't have Stealth Rocks against me. And March Fires is a very experienced player, so he switched out to Groudon Fear of Grass Knot, and I switched into Groudon, trying to catch probably Latias or something that I could Stealth Rock on. Stealth Rock would be good, but he goes Darkrai. I go Ho-Oh though. He predicts correctly with the Dark Void, and I can easily stay in here to see what set he's running and try to sleep talk a random move, but he showed Taunt. But since he taunts, I can pick a move again. So I'm not locked into Sleep Talk. So I might as well just see if I can wake up and get a very cheap KO, which I don't. And now sleep turns reset in black and white, so I switch out because I don't want to die, and I go to my Groudon. And special defensive Groudon takes very little from Darkrai. So I get a prime opportunity to just get myself up. And Groudon isn't useful to check anything defensive, so it's all fine. And again, here comes the play with Espeon. Actually, here comes a turn where I had to break 50-50 to get some chip damage. But now that I got some chip damage, I can guarantee a condition with Espeon, or so I thought. So I can go for another 50-50, and he basically this sequence was he won a couple of 50-50, I won 2. So what happened is that I could go into Darkrai with Taunt, so I can keep the chain up by not allowing Stealth Rocks. And as you see, it's turn 15 and still hasn't gotten up Stealth Rocks, and now he gets the only chance.
Notice how much health Ho-Oh has regenerated, by the way. Good lord.
Yeah, and here, Jolly Choice Band pulls 2/3 of a chance to KO the Groudon. If Earthquake is pulled, then it's not a KO. And sometimes versus good players, you have to go for these plays. It's simple as that. 2/3 is as good a chance as any. So Arceus reveals Sub, and it's a Ghost, as I guessed, and kills my Darkrai. But now that I know it's Sub, I know that it doesn't have Recover, because it still needs Focus Blast to hit normal types. So I go get a guaranteed Sleep Talk, because Sleep turns reset. But now I know that he wants to sub down, so try to get me to wake up. But then I go to Giratina, which can Shadow Sneak the sub and always live a Judgment. So this is a very strange one where Giratina to check Arceus Ghost. And finally, I think this is about it. I think at this point the game is over. I sack the Groudon to get some more Life Orb recoil. And then I simply have all the conditions I need for my Arceus normal to be very strong. So I don't even need to set up. I just pick off the Darkrai, and I set up with Genesect instead. And I can hope for paralysis here. So I just, I get one. Not that was too necessary. And Arceus Ghost comes in, almost dies to rocks. And he tries to catch my choke, I suppose, if I were to switch, and then then Arceus cleans it up. So takeaways: Darkrai, how to prevent hazards with Espeon Darkrai combo, how to play aggressively, and how to guarantee certain conditions, and sometimes 50-50 it with these teams.
Nice.
So yeah, that's a very quick one.
All right, and now we are going to wrap things up with this game of Edgar's. Edgar, if you want to take it away.
Okay, so...
Oh, there's a Zekrom. I'm so happy.
Yeah, so this is basically what I want to showcase is the matchup between offense and balance, like traditional balance. I'm using a Heatran Sun balance. Heatran is really good in the right conditions, and my opponent is using a spike stacking balance with, offense with Smeargle and Kyogre. So we can take it away from here. So here a little of Groudon because I have a Lone Berry, and my opponent Sainara is using Smeargle, which normally carries Spore, and I can break the Sash with Earthquake, and here I can go to Zekrom to take in the Spore because I have Sleep Talk, but my opponent is pretty smart and goes for Spikes. And then here I can just Volt Switch and go into Latias, because even if she goes to Genesect, it's better that she goes to Genesect directly than she goes to Dialga directly, because it's harder to switch into, and I don't want those rocks. So that's exactly what I do. I go into Zekrom directly, and I take the U-turn damage, and she goes to Dialga, and then I proceed to go into Heatran. Heatran is a very good answer to Dialga in Sun, predicting the Draco, and here I can just taunt the Dialga to prevent the rocks. So now she is going to go to Kyogre, predicting that I go for Toxic. This is basically the way you have to play. Even if you have balance, you have to make some very you have to be on point with what your opponent is going to make if you're facing offense, because you can be overrun by it very quickly. But here I just choose to recover to preserve my Latias a little bit longer, and here I just U-turn. Here I just go to Heatran on the U-turn, and I believe I go to my Latias again, and my opponent, very smart, predicts that and goes to Dialga, so the rocks are secured. And since I know that, I'm just going to go for Draco Meteor and get some damage in for my Arceus Ghost. But here I just miss, and that is actually crucial because now I have to hit Focus Blast. It kills from this range, but of course I need to hit. Luckily I do. And then I go to, she goes to Kyogre. I go to Latias once again. There's nothing preventing me from doing that. And now she couldn't Wire Spot because it was too low, and I decided to make a risk play and just go for HP Fire to get some damage on the Genesect. And now since it's damaged, I can go to Heatran and sack it to this Kyogre. Since Genesect is worn down and spikes are gonna be up in this matchup, I decided to sack it. And now I can just go Latias and go for Draco Meteor, trying to hit something that wants to come in. This is where Dragon Pulse is better, by the way, just as a side note. And here, this is a very crucial play. I know that she's going to be scared of Toxic from my Fortress, so I decide to make a little bit risky play and go for Rapid Spin.
That was awesome.
And that's basically the risk you kind of have to make, because if those hazards were up, I would have lost the game for sure, because nothing could switch into Kyogre, Latias, and Ghostius being alive. So I decide to do that. Then I go for Calm Mind with my Arceus. She goes to Latias. You can see the bulk of Latias here, by the way. It takes a +1 judgment.
That's crazy. That's because that's got Spooky Plate behind it too.
Yeah. So here I just let my Groudon die, and now it's a very safe bet with Zekrom and Fortress.
I just wanted to note the Dragon Breath on that Latias. What is that?
Yeah, that was,
it's a very niche choice, but maybe worth on very bulky because you're not dealing damage anyway.
Yeah, but
That's
here
crazy.
basically I can just switch out into Fortress, and all I need to do to win the game is to hit a Toxic, because she needs to hit 2 Focus Blasts, and even if she hits the first one, I can just Pain Split with Fortress and get all my health back. So that Arceus Ghost actually loses to Fortress 1v1. So
And I must say, I think one interesting aspect of play game was that I don't know if it was consciously, but you damaged the Ghost Resist pretty well. So I think even if it comes to that, you had a speed tie chance always with you got the damage on the Genesect and Dialga so early.
yeah. Yeah,
All
so that's basically it.
All right.
I just want to showcase that for all the people who like bulkier teams, there's hope in terms of playing against hyper offense. You just need to be very aware of what you need to, the steps you need to make.
That was a really good one, because you were playing with no hazards against a team with hazards, but you were doing a lot of damage while the hazards were being set up, and that's really important, and especially for planning ahead. All right, so I'm just gonna ask you guys to give one underrated set that you really like in Gen 5 Ubers, and then I will let you go, because this has gone on for a really long time. So, Blim, do you have anything underrated that you really like? Something cool?
It's hard. It's hard. I can say I can't really think of an underrated set at the moment. But as far as underrated Pokemon, I could definitely name one. I definitely am a big fan of Heatran in the meta game. I think that it doesn't get enough love because it's one of the few reliable checks to both Laddie twins. It's a very good Genesect counter. They'll gear Palkia and Sun, and it can also set up rocks and stall break with his taunt set. and it's a very good pairing if you pair it up with Arceus Ghost and Giratina, and it forms a very good core. So I definitely think Heatron, while it's not an underrated set, it's definitely an underrated Pokemon that probably should be used a little bit more.
All right, cool. Edgar?
I think Toxic Protect Dialga is something really underrated. I think on Sun or Sand teams, that Pokemon offers so much. Just the combination of Dragon Pulse, Fire Blast, Toxic Protect allows you to soft check a lot of things and to stall out a lot of Pokemon, and while being an offensive threat, because Dragon Pulse plus toxic damage is actually really devastating. So I really recommend people trying that set, and yeah, basically.
All right, and finally, Hack?
Yeah, I'm gonna say Toxic Protect, Rapid Spin, Excadrill for bulkier rain teams. It might not be that underrated anymore, but the thing is, in the past, many people tried to use Excadrill for too many things at once. So they tried to slot Rocks, Spin, and Toxic on them. But with Protect, you can actually have a decent shot at wearing down the ghosts you're trying to spin against. For example, Giratina O, if they don't run Rest. But if they run Rest, you have the Mold Breaker Earthquake, which actually does huge damage to Giratina O. So, and you can Protect on the Sleep Talk turns to not get phased out. So it's actually super anti-Giratina O, and you have a good chance of stalling versus Arceus Ghost as well. And Giratina A is not that common. So I think one should, and I guess a general thing I noticed throughout the years is that you should probably try to specialize your Pokemon rather than try to do them, trying to make them do all things at once. And this is a perfect example, I think. And obviously, Excadrill still checks a lot of things on the metagames that are trouble for bulky rain teams such as Dialga and Latios.
That is really good advice. Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, that's really good advice in every tier. Don't try to do too much with the Pokemon, or it will just be disappointing most of the time. All right. We are at 2 hours, 36 minutes, so I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you to everyone who has listened thus far. I hope this has been enjoyable. Thank you to these guys for talking with me for so long about this wonderful, wonderful metagame. Get out there and go to the Uber's room and the Ruins of Alpharoom and bug people to play you in it, because it is so much fun. So, yeah, thank you guys so much, and I will catch you next time.